I exist because I believe. You believe in yourself to stay sane, but belief is built by a self you're unsure exists, making the foundation depend on the structure it supports. This is the essence of the paradox I call I exist because I believe, a profound existential loop where identity and belief entwine in a delicate dance of uncertainty and necessity. At its core, it reveals a fragile truth. Our sense of self is both the foundation and the construct of our belief, creating a circular dependency that shapes how we perceive reality and ourselves. From early life, we begin to form a concept of I, a coherent, continuous self that experiences, acts, and reflects. Yet, this self is not a fixed entity, but an evolving narrative constructed by the mind. We need to believe in this self to function. Belief acts as glue, binding our experiences into a stable identity. Without belief, the self fragments into doubt, confusion, and existential disarray. Yet the catch is that belief itself arises from the self. How can you believe in something whose existence you cannot fully verify? This paradox creates a feedback loop. The self exists because we believe in it, but belief requires a self to be its object. Philosophers and psychologists have long grappled with this tension. René Descartes famously stated, "I think, therefore I am," anchoring existence in the act of thought. Yet modern cognitive science reveals that the self is a dynamic, emergent process rather than a static thing. Memories, emotions, and perceptions flow through this process, giving the illusion of a continuous self. Belief stabilizes this process, offering a narrative thread that holds identity together through time. This loop can cause profound psychological unease. When belief falters, through trauma, dissociation, or deep introspection, the self can feel hollow, unreal, or disconnected. The mind struggles to maintain coherence, and anxiety or existential dread may arise. The sensation of not existing, or not being real, is a manifestation of this fragile dependency. Consider individuals who experience depersonalization or derealization disorders. They report feeling detached from themselves or the world, questioning their own existence. Their belief in the self wavers, shaking the foundation of identity. This phenomenon illustrates how belief is not merely a mental abstraction, but a vital mechanism for sustaining our lived reality. Breaking the cycle or resolving this paradox does not mean disproving the self, but embracing its fluidity and constructed nature. Mindfulness and contemplative practices encourage witnessing thoughts and sensations without attachment, revealing the self as a process rather than a fixed entity. This perspective alleviates suffering by loosening rigid beliefs about who we must be. Therapeutic approaches such as narrative therapy invite individuals to author their own stories, reinforcing agency over the self-concept. By consciously shaping the narrative, belief becomes an active choice, rather than a passive dependency, allowing the self to emerge resiliently. Neuroscientific studies support this view, showing that brain networks involved in self-referential thinking are plastic and modifiable. The self is not set in stone, but continuously reassembled, making belief a dynamic, participatory act. The paradox of I exist because I believe calls us to a deeper understanding of identity. It challenges the notion of a singular, permanent self and invites us to find stability within uncertainty. It teaches that belief is both necessity and creation, a bridge between absence and presence. Living with this awareness cultivates humility and openness. It frees us from the tyranny of fixed identities and allows us to flow with the ever-changing nature of consciousness. Belief becomes a sacred act of self-creation, an affirmation of existence amidst mystery. In embracing the paradox, you discover that existence is not a static fact, but a living, breathing process sustained by the very belief that questions it. This dynamic interplay is the heartbeat of human experience, the fragile, profound dance of being. Certainty is my compass. The stronger you grip certainty, the more blind you become to nuance. But the moment you question it, it dissolves, making guidance vanish mid-journey. This paradox lies at the heart of human experience, reflecting the tension between our innate craving for certainty and the fluid, unpredictable nature of reality. Certainty offers comfort, structure, and a sense of direction. It acts as a compass, guiding decisions, beliefs, and actions in an often chaotic world. Yet, This very grip on certainty can narrow perception, occlude subtle truths, and harden perspectives, blinding you to complexity and nuance. The paradox deepens when, upon questioning certainty, the foundation that once seemed solid crumbles, leaving you feeling lost, adrift, and without clear guidance. From childhood, certainty is a psychological anchor. Rules, routines, and beliefs provide stability and safety. The brain's natural tendency to categorize and predict fosters a need for clear answers and fixed truths. Certainty reduces cognitive load, eases anxiety, and supports coherent identity formation. When certainty is firm, your mind experiences a sense of control and security. But this comes at a cost. Certainty can calcify into dogma, limiting openness to new information and alternative perspectives. It filters experience through rigid schemas, dismissing ambiguity and complexity as threats. Neuroscience reveals that certainty activates reward pathways in the brain, releasing dopamine that reinforces the preference for stable beliefs. Contrarily, uncertainty triggers the amygdala and stress responses, activating vigilance and discomfort. This biological wiring explains why humans often cling to certainty, even when it is flawed or incomplete. Certainty feels like survival, while doubt feels like danger. However, reality rarely conforms neatly to fixed certainty. The world is complex, layered, and in flux. When you encounter contradictions or ambiguous data, the cracks in your certainty begin to show. Questioning what you once held as truth can provoke cognitive dissonance, a psychological discomfort signaling the need to adjust beliefs. But this process can be destabilizing, especially when certainty has been tightly held as identity or worldview. The moment you allow doubt in, the guiding compass seems to vanish. Without firm footing, decision-making feels paralyzed. Direction is unclear. This experience can be terrifying because it challenges the illusion of control. Yet, it also marks a critical point of growth. The dissolution of certainty invites a deeper engagement with nuance, complexity, and paradox. It is the gateway to intellectual humility and psychological flexibility. In practice, this tension plays out across many areas of life: relationships, career, politics, spirituality, and self-understanding. People who rigidly cling to certainty may struggle to adapt or empathize with others, while those who embrace uncertainty risk feeling adrift. The challenge is to navigate between these poles, to hold enough certainty to act and enough openness to learn. Philosophically, this is the dance between faith and doubt, knowledge and mystery. Eastern traditions emphasize embracing uncertainty as a path to wisdom, encouraging presence in the unknown. Western thought often prizes certainty but increasingly recognizes the value of ambiguity. Psychologically, resilience involves tolerating uncertainty without capitulating to anxiety. Practically, cultivating this balance requires metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe one's own thought processes. Mindfulness practice enhances tolerance for uncertainty by grounding attention in the present moment rather than future outcomes. Cognitive flexibility can be strengthened by actively seeking diverse perspectives and questioning assumptions gently. Importantly, questioning certainty does not mean abandoning all beliefs or moral compasses. It means recognizing the provisional nature of knowledge and the limits of human understanding. Certainty becomes a tool, not a cage. It guides when appropriate but yields gracefully when evidence or experience demands. The journey through this paradox is often nonlinear. You may oscillate between conviction and doubt multiple times. Each cycle deepens insight and refines your internal compass. The discomfort of lost certainty is temporary, replaced gradually by a nuanced, adaptive orientation that embraces complexity. In this evolved state, guidance does not vanish, but transforms. It becomes less about fixed points and more about dynamic navigation, responsive to context, feedback, and ongoing learning. Your compass shifts from rigid bearings to attuned sensitivity, enabling you to move forward amid uncertainty with curiosity and courage. This paradox reminds us that certainty, while alluring, is not the ultimate goal. Wisdom lies in balancing confidence with humility, conviction with openness. It invites a life lived not by clinging to absolutes, but by dancing gracefully with ambiguity, trusting that even when guidance seems to vanish, the journey itself reveals new paths. Understanding this tension empowers you to release the need for control and to welcome the unfolding of experience as it is, complex, uncertain, and richly nuanced. It is in this release that true guidance emerges, not as a fixed destination, but as an ongoing, evolving compass pointing toward growth, connection, and authentic presence. Belief creates reality. Belief is one of the most powerful forces shaping human experience. What you hold as true colors your perception, molds your decisions, and weaves the fabric of your reality. If you believe something hard enough, it doesn't just live in your mind, it becomes real. It shapes how you act, how you see others, and ultimately, the world you inhabit. This phenomenon is the essence of belief creating reality. But with this power comes a paradox so profound, it can unravel certainty itself. Knowing that belief shapes reality makes every belief suspicious, and belief begins to collapse under its own influence. From the moment we start interpreting the world, our minds form beliefs, mental models or maps that help us navigate complexity. These beliefs filter information, confirm what we expect, and reject what contradicts. They become self-reinforcing loops where perception and reality entwine. For example, if you believe people cannot be trusted, your brain will tune in to signs of betrayal, often overlooking evidence of kindness. Over time, your world reflects this suspicion, confirming the belief. This cycle is powerful and adaptive, allowing us to survive and make sense of an overwhelming reality. But it also binds us. The more a belief defines your experience, the harder it becomes to see beyond it. Beliefs shape reality by filtering what you notice, how you respond, and which paths you take. They become self-fulfilling prophecies. Yet, here lies the collapse. The very awareness that beliefs create reality breeds doubt. If belief can create any reality, how can you trust any belief? This meta-awareness turns certainty into suspicion. Every conviction becomes a question, every truth a hypothesis. You begin to see beliefs as fragile constructs, liable to shift, distort, or dissolve. This makes holding belief difficult, like trying to grasp water with your hands. This paradox destabilizes the foundation of knowing. If your beliefs shape your reality, then reality itself becomes subjective, mutable, and elusive. What is true for one may be false for another. This challenges the notion of objective truth, pushing you into a landscape of uncertainty where every belief is both powerful and vulnerable. Consider the emotional impact. Belief collapse can be disorienting, even terrifying. Without stable beliefs, the world loses its solid ground. You may feel unmoored, questioning everything you once held as fact or meaning. This existential trembling is the cost of seeing beliefs' true power and fragility. Neurologically, belief formation and revision involve complex brain circuits. The prefrontal cortex evaluates evidence and makes judgments, while the limbic system colors belief with emotion and attachment. The stronger the emotional investment, the harder beliefs resist change. But once doubt seeps in, cognitive dissonance arises, triggering discomfort and a drive to resolve contradiction, sometimes by clinging tighter, sometimes by letting go. This dynamic is a crucible for growth. The collapse of rigid beliefs opens space for curiosity, flexibility, and deeper understanding. It invites humility, the recognition that your map is not the territory, and that reality may be far more complex than your current beliefs suggest. To navigate this paradox, mindfulness and reflective inquiry become vital. By observing beliefs without attachment, you can hold them lightly, allowing them to shift without losing your sense of self. This non-dogmatic stance fosters openness, creativity, and compassion toward others' perspectives. Imagine a life where beliefs are tools, not prisons, where you harness their power to shape reality, but remain vigilant against their distortions, where certainty gives way to thoughtful exploration and truth becomes a living dialogue rather than a fixed point. Belief creates reality, yes, but belief aware of itself becomes a dynamic dance. It is a dance of creation and dissolution, power and vulnerability, certainty and doubt. Mastering this dance is a path toward wisdom. The moment you embrace the paradox of belief, its ability to create and to collapse, you step into a deeper freedom. You no longer blindly follow beliefs, but engage with them as conscious architects of your experience. In this space, reality unfolds not as a fixed script, but as a vibrant, evolving story, shaped by your beliefs, but not confined by them. This is the profound liberation that comes from seeing belief not as a final answer, but as a creative force to be wielded with care, awareness, and grace. I can think freely. You believe your thoughts are your own, but that belief itself was taught to you, making your sense of freedom a complex dance with unseen influences that shape your mind from the very beginning. This phenomenon, which we can call the illusion of independent thought, reveals that what feels like personal freedom is actually deeply intertwined with the teachings, conditioning, and subtle manipulations of the world around you. Your thoughts emerge not from a vacuum, but within a framework built by family, culture, education, media, and countless social forces that guide, limit, and sometimes even dictate what you consider your own ideas. From the earliest moments of life, you are immersed in an environment that filters your perception of reality. Parents, teachers, peers, and society impart values, beliefs, and ways of thinking that become internalized as your mental landscape. You learn not only what to think, but how to think. What questions are allowed, which answers are acceptable, and which thoughts are dangerous or taboo. These early imprints build neural pathways that bias your cognitive patterns, reinforcing familiar ideas and suppressing alternatives. Over time, this conditioning feels natural, so deeply ingrained that your thoughts appear to be spontaneous products of your free will. Consider how language itself shapes thought. The words and concepts you use to interpret experience are inherited from the culture and community that raised you. Even the structure of your language directs your attention and frames your reasoning. Your inner voice, the stream of consciousness that narrates your life, is largely a reflection of this inherited code, echoing phrases and attitudes absorbed from external sources. The you who believes in free thought is itself a construction built upon layers of social influence. Neuroscience supports this view. Studies show that much of your brain's activity occurs beneath conscious awareness, with decisions forming milliseconds before you become aware of making them. Your brain constantly processes inputs, memories, emotions, and environmental cues, integrating them into thoughts that feel like your own creations. Yet, this integration is filtered through the subconscious biases shaped by your upbringing and context. Free thought, then, is not the absence of influence, but the navigation through a complex web of internalized programming. This raises profound questions about autonomy and identity. If your thoughts are not purely your own, what does it mean to be free? The answer lies in awareness. Freedom is less about originating entirely new ideas in isolation, and more about recognizing the sources of your influences, questioning inherited beliefs, and choosing which ones to accept, reject, or transform. It is the conscious act of engaging with the echoes of your past and the present context to shape your mental landscape intentionally. The illusion of independent thought can also be comforting. Believing in your mental sovereignty supports self-esteem and agency. Yet, it can become limiting if it blinds you to the subtle ways your freedom is circumscribed. Many live unaware of how external forces, media narratives, social norms, educational systems, steer thoughts, emotions, and decisions. This unawareness perpetuates cycles of conformity and manipulation, making true mental freedom elusive. Breaking free from this illusion is both challenging and liberating. It requires critical thinking, self-reflection, and sometimes discomfort as you confront the gaps between your perceived and actual autonomy. Philosophical traditions and mindfulness practices encourage this journey, teaching that self-knowledge and detachment from conditioned patterns open pathways to genuine freedom. In practical terms, this means cultivating curiosity about your beliefs and thoughts, seeking diverse perspectives, and nurturing an inner dialogue that questions rather than accepts. It means recognizing that freedom of thought is a process, dynamic, ongoing, and relational, not a fixed state. You become an active participant in your cognitive evolution rather than a passive product. The illusion of independent thought also invites humility and empathy. Understanding that everyone's mental freedom is influenced by unseen forces fosters compassion for the struggles of others navigating their conditioned minds. It reminds us that mental autonomy is a shared human challenge, shaped by culture, history, and circumstance. In everyday moments, notice when a thought feels automatic or unquestioned. Ask, where did this idea come from? Whose voice echoes in my mind? What beliefs have I inherited uncritically? These questions open doors to deeper awareness and empowerment. Ultimately, the belief that you think freely is both a gift and a challenge. It gives you the possibility of autonomy and creativity, while challenging you to continuously unravel the threads of influence woven into your consciousness. Embracing this complexity is the path to true freedom, an active, conscious engagement with the self shaped by many voices, yet uniquely yours to command. Doubt makes me smarter. You doubt everything to be wise, but doubting doubt itself becomes paralysis. Intelligence becomes a feedback loop with no exit. Doubt is often hailed as the hallmark of wisdom, a sign that you are questioning, learning, and not accepting everything at face value. It fuels critical thinking, inquiry, and skepticism, tools essential for navigating a complex world. But what happens when doubt turns inward, reflecting not just on the world, but on itself? When you begin to doubt the very act of doubting, an endless loop of uncertainty emerges, trapping your mind in paralysis. At first, doubt is productive. It challenges assumptions, exposing biases, and prompting deeper understanding. The brain engages its executive functions to analyze, compare evidence, and reconsider beliefs. This process can lead to insight and growth. But when doubt spirals into doubting doubt, the process becomes recursive and self-defeating. Your mind gets caught in a loop where every conclusion is questioned, every decision suspended, and every action postponed. This loop is fueled by anxiety and fear, the fear of making mistakes, being wrong, or committing prematurely to a belief or course of action. Neurologically, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning, becomes overactivated, while the limbic system, managing emotions, amplifies uncertainty and worry. This combination can overwhelm cognitive resources, leading to decision fatigue and mental exhaustion. Imagine standing at a crossroads, endlessly questioning which path to take, then questioning your doubts about each path, and doubting your doubts about those doubts. Each layer adds complexity without resolution. This creates what's known as analysis paralysis, a state where the fear of error prevents any movement forward. Ironically, this paralysis is a form of mental stasis that undermines the very wisdom doubt was meant to nurture. The feedback loop also distorts your self-perception. You may start to see yourself as indecisive, insecure, or even unintelligent because your mind is trapped in this endless cycle. This negative self-view fuels more doubt, worsening the loop. Socially, this can manifest as avoidance of responsibility, procrastination, or difficulty asserting opinions, further isolating you and reducing opportunities for learning through experience. Breaking free from this loop requires cultivating a balance between healthy skepticism and trust in yourself and the process. One strategy is setting boundaries for doubt. Give yourself permission to question, but also to accept provisional answers or decisions, understanding that certainty is often elusive. Embrace imperfection and the possibility of error as natural parts of growth rather than failures. Mindfulness and acceptance practices can also help by grounding you in the present moment, reducing the anxiety that fuels recursive doubt. By observing thoughts without judgment, you create mental space to interrupt the loop and respond with clarity rather than reaction. Another vital step is building confidence through action. Small decisions, even imperfect ones, create feedback that trains your brain to tolerate uncertainty. Each action taken dissolves layers of doubt and builds resilience. Over time, you learn that wisdom is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to act despite it. Therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy can support this process by helping identify and reframe unhelpful thought patterns. Challenging the belief that every doubt must be resolved before moving forward reduces the cognitive burden and restores mental flexibility. In summary, doubt makes you smarter by fostering critical inquiry, but doubting doubt itself can trap you in an endless feedback loop of paralysis. This cycle drains cognitive energy, undermines confidence, and stalls growth. Yet, by balancing skepticism with acceptance, practicing mindfulness, and embracing imperfect action, you can break the loop. You regain not just intelligence, but wisdom, the ability to navigate uncertainty with courage and clarity. Remember, Wisdom is not found in perfect certainty, but in the grace to move forward through the fog of doubt. To know is to see, ChatGPT said, you chase understanding like light, but as soon as you see truth, you shape it. And now the original is gone, replaced by your perception. This is the subtle and profound paradox I call to know is to see, where the act of perceiving transforms the very reality we seek to understand. The pursuit of knowledge feels like reaching for an objective, unchanging light, a pure truth waiting to be uncovered. Yet, in the moment of recognition, that light bends, refracts, and becomes something new. The truth is seen through your unique lens, colored by your mind, experiences, and biases. From infancy, our brains are wired to interpret sensory input, constructing models of the world to navigate reality. This construction is essential for survival, but it is also inherently subjective. Every perception filters reality through the prism of memory, emotion, culture, and expectation. Thus, the truth we grasp is never untouched or pure. It is always a version refracted through our individual consciousness. Philosophers have long debated this interplay. The idea echoes Kant's distinction between the noumenon, the thing in itself, and the phenomenon, the thing as it appears to us. We can never access the noumenon directly. We only engage with the phenomenon shaped by our cognitive faculties. Similarly, in quantum physics, the observer effect reveals that the act of observation alters the system observed, blurring the line between objective reality and perception. This paradox manifests in everyday life. When you learn something new, your understanding is immediately influenced by your prior knowledge and beliefs. You do not see the fact nakedly. You interpret, contextualize, and often reshape it to fit your mental framework. This shaping is necessary. It allows integration and meaning-making, but it means that pure, unfiltered truth slips away the moment you claim to know it. Consider how two people witness the same event, yet recount it differently. Each perception is a reality shaped by unique histories and perspectives. The original event, as it happened, dissolves into a mosaic of subjective truths. This does not diminish the value of knowledge, but reminds us of its inherent fluidity and relational nature. Psychologically, recognizing this paradox fosters humility and openness. It invites awareness that your beliefs and understandings are provisional, subject to revision as new perspectives emerge. This mindset encourages dialogue, curiosity, and the willingness to question your assumptions. In science, this principle underpins the iterative nature of inquiry. Hypotheses evolve, models are refined, and understanding deepens over time. The acknowledgement that observation shapes reality drives rigor and reflection, preventing dogmatic certainty. Spiritual traditions also echo this insight. Many emphasize direct experience beyond conceptual knowledge, suggesting that ultimate truth transcends intellectual grasping and emerges in silent witnessing or presence. Embracing to know is to see means accepting that knowledge is both a gift and a transformation. Each act of seeing alters the landscape of understanding, making truth a living, dynamic dance between observer and observed. In this dance, you become both seeker and creator, forever shaping and being shaped by the light you chase. The original may be lost, but what emerges is a richer, more nuanced reality, your unique truth, ever unfolding. I choose what I believe. You believe belief is chosen. But you didn't choose your culture, your first language, or the frame that lets you believe choice is real. This profound paradox reveals the hidden layers beneath the seemingly simple act of believing. At first glance, belief appears to be a conscious, autonomous decision, something you control and select freely. Yet, when you examine the foundations of your beliefs, you discover they are deeply rooted in contexts, systems, and frameworks you never chose but inherited. Your sense of choice itself is framed by cultural, linguistic, and psychological structures that shape what is thinkable, feelable, and possible. From birth, you are immersed in a complex matrix of influences. The language you speak, the values and norms of your culture, the stories and symbols that surround you. These shape your cognitive architecture and emotional landscape, providing the categories and concepts through which you interpret reality. You do not decide to adopt these foundations. They are given, absorbed implicitly. They set the stage on which the drama of belief unfolds, delimiting the boundaries of what can be believed and how belief feels. Neuroscience and cognitive science show that much of your mental framework operates unconsciously, driven by implicit biases, early conditioning, and neural pathways forged long before conscious reflection. The very idea of choice is mediated through these layers. Your brain's predictive coding models use prior experiences and cultural priors to shape perception and thought, creating a sense of agency that is itself constructed. Thus, the feeling that you choose beliefs freely is filtered through inherited cognitive lenses. Consider language. It is not merely a tool for communication, but a structure that shapes thought itself. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis suggests that the language you speak influences how you perceive time, space, causality, and identity. Your first language frames your understanding of the world, predisposing you towards certain beliefs and interpretations. You did not choose this lens. It was bestowed by your environment and upbringing. Culture adds another powerful dimension. It encodes collective beliefs, rituals, and moral frameworks that inform individual convictions. Cultural narratives become so ingrained that they operate as invisible defaults, guiding what seems natural or true. Challenging these foundational beliefs often feels destabilizing because it threatens not only ideas, but identity and belonging. This paradox also highlights the limits of conscious will in shaping belief. While you can reflect, question, and revise your beliefs, the act of believing is not simply a rational choice. It is an embodied, emotionally charged process intertwined with identity, memory, and social connection. Attempts to force belief change without engaging these dimensions often fail or provoke resistance. The tension between belief as choice and belief as inherited framework invites deep inquiry into free will and autonomy. Philosophers have long debated whether true freedom exists in belief or whether it is conditioned by prior causes. Contemporary neuroscience suggests that conscious awareness and intention influence, but do not wholly determine belief formation. This insight is both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it reveals the constraints shaping your mental world, limiting pure autonomy. Empowering because recognizing these constraints opens the possibility for mindful reflection and transformative learning. Awareness of inherited frameworks allows you to question, expand, and revise beliefs with greater wisdom and flexibility. Practically, this means cultivating metacognition, thinking about thinking, and cultural humility. Engaging with diverse perspectives, languages, and experiences broadens the frame through which you understand belief. It fosters empathy and reduces dogmatism, recognizing that belief systems are context-dependent rather than absolute. It also means embracing uncertainty and complexity in belief formation, rather than demanding certainty or purity of choice. You acknowledge the layered, dynamic nature of belief as evolving interplay between inherited structures and conscious reflection. This stance cultivates openness and resilience in the face of conflicting information or challenging ideas. In relationships and dialogue, this paradox encourages patience and curiosity. Understanding that others' beliefs arise from different, unchosen frames fosters respect and bridges divides. It shifts conversations from battles over correctness to explorations of differing worldviews. Ultimately, recognizing that you did not choose the frames that shape belief does not negate your agency. Rather, it situates agency within a broader, richer context. You choose within inherited conditions, and this choice is meaningful precisely because it is informed, conscious, and ongoing. The paradox, "I choose what I believe," becomes a dynamic dance between freedom and structure, self and context, consciousness and inheritance. It invites you to navigate belief with awareness, humility, and creativity, embracing the gifts and limits of the frames you inhabit. In this embrace lies profound freedom, not the illusion of absolute choice, but the real power to shape, question, and live your beliefs with intentionality and grace within the vast, intricate web of influences that define human existence. Identity is self-created. We like to think of identity as a project we build from scratch, a self-fashioned sculpture molded by our own hands, on our own terms. The truth is more complex, more layered, and more haunting. Yes, you shape yourself, but the very tools you use to craft that self, your language, your beliefs, your desires, even your will, are inherited. Passed down like unseen currents, your identity is not purely original, but a tapestry woven from ancestral threads. What feels like self-creation is often ancestral repetition in disguise. From the earliest moments of life, you absorb far more than you realize. Your family's stories, values, fears, hopes, and wounds imprint on your developing psyche. These invisible inheritances shape how you see the world, how you feel about yourself, and the language you use to define your existence. Your identity grows not in a vacuum, but within a dense web of ancestral influence, culture, and history. Even the words you speak carry echoes of generations past. Language itself is a vessel of collective memory. The metaphors you choose, the narratives you construct, the moral frameworks you adopt, all bear traces of ancestors you may never have met. When you declare, "I am this," or "I am not that," you are often echoing voices handed down to you, their intentions woven into your subconscious. Your will, the drive to become and to change, is also not entirely your own. It pulses within inherited patterns of behavior and survival strategies shaped by ancestral environments. The choices you perceive as uniquely yours may be guided by deeply ingrained scripts of resilience, fear, or hope that stretch back beyond your own life. This ancestral repetition can feel like both gift and prison. It grants you roots, identity, and a sense of belonging. But it can also bind you to unresolved traumas, limiting beliefs, and patterns of suffering passed through generations. The dance of self-creation is shadowed by the ghostly presence of those who came before, influencing the steps you take. The paradox is clear. In shaping yourself, you also reenact ancestral stories. This does not diminish your agency, but invites deeper awareness. To truly create the self on your terms, you must first recognize and honor the ancestral currents flowing within you. Psychologically, this involves uncovering hidden loyalties and inherited wounds. Therapeutic practices like family systems therapy, genograms, and ancestral healing help reveal these invisible threads. When you trace the lineage of your beliefs and patterns, you gain power to choose which to continue and which to transform. Neurologically, your brain is plastic, capable of rewiring and growth. Awareness rewires old pathways, loosening ancestral hold and allowing new identities to emerge. Mindfulness, somatic work, and conscious storytelling become tools for this radical self-creation. Imagine reclaiming your narrative, not as a passive recipient of ancestral scripts, but as an active author weaving your own story. This requires courage to face inherited shadows and wisdom to embrace ancestral gifts. It demands you listen to the voices of the past without becoming their prisoner. Self-creation becomes a sacred act of dialogue between past and present, a weaving of ancestral threads into new patterns. It honors lineage while innovating, respects history while evolving. This path frees you from unconscious repetition. It invites authenticity grounded in lineage, but liberated by choice. You become not just a product of inheritance, but a creator who reshapes the legacy you carry. Identity is not fixed, but fluid, a living mosaic of self and ancestry. To shape yourself on your own terms is to dance with the past, to transform its echoes into a future of your own design. In this dance, you find freedom, the profound freedom to be both heir and artist, to inherit without being confined, to create without denying. Yourself is your masterpiece, painted with ancestral colors but guided by your hand. The journey of identity is not solitary, but a conversation across time, a testament to resilience, transformation, and creation. Logic will save me. You follow logic to survive chaos. But logic itself is built on axioms that cannot be proven, which means the safe path you trust floats on unprovable ghosts. This paradox, which we might call the logic paradox of survival, reveals a profound tension at the heart of human reasoning and the quest for certainty. Logic is the tool you wield to make sense of a turbulent world, to chart a path through uncertainty and danger. Yet, beneath every logical system lie foundational assumptions, axioms, accepted without proof, invisible supports that hold up the entire structure. Your reliance on logic as a guide is therefore built upon beliefs that themselves rest on faith, not absolute proof. From childhood, you learn to trust reasoning as the compass in a sea of chaos. Logic offers clarity, predictability, and a semblance of control, allowing you to navigate decisions and understand cause and effect. It is the method by which science advances, societies organize, and individuals make choices. You build your survival strategies, emotional, practical, intellectual, on this foundation of reason. But logic, as mathematicians and philosophers have long shown, cannot prove its own starting points. The axioms, basic truths such as things exist, cause precedes effect, or the principles of identity and non-contradiction, are taken as given. They are the invisible bedrock, not arrived at by logic, but by assumption, intuition, or convention. This means every logical conclusion you draw depends on these unprovable premises, making your certainty conditional, not absolute. This paradox becomes especially vivid in moments of crisis or profound uncertainty. When chaos threatens to overwhelm, you cling to logical frameworks to find safety. Yet the awareness that these frameworks rest on unprovable assumptions can destabilize your confidence. It reveals that your safe path is constructed on foundations you cannot fully justify, floating on ghosts that logic cannot dispel. Philosophers like Kurt Gödel demonstrated these limits with his incompleteness theorems, showing that within any sufficiently complex logical system, there are truths that cannot be proven by that system itself. This shakes the very idea that logic can offer a complete, self-contained roadmap. The safe path you seek is always partial, provisional, and contingent. Yet, this does not render logic useless or futile. Instead, it calls for humility and awareness. Understanding the foundations of logic invites you to recognize the limits of certainty and the necessity of faith. Faith in axioms, in assumptions, in the coherence of experience. It frees you from dogmatic attachment to absolute proof and opens space for creativity, intuition, and acceptance of mystery. Survival, then, is not just about strict adherence to logical rules, but about balancing reason with openness to the unknown. It's about navigating with a map that is imperfect, acknowledging that some paths are chosen by trust rather than proof. This balance is what allows resilience amid chaos, combining the strength of logic with the flexibility of belief. In daily life, this paradox surfaces when decisions must be made without complete information or when emotions defy neat reasoning. It challenges you to hold contradictions, uncertainties, and unprovable assumptions without despair. It teaches that safety is not an absolute endpoint, but a dynamic process woven from both logic and faith. The logic paradox of survival also invites reflection on how you construct meaning and make sense of your experiences. It encourages questioning your assumptions and exploring alternative perspectives, knowing that no system holds all answers. This openness enriches your understanding and deepens your engagement with life's complexities. Ultimately, the paradox reveals a profound truth about the human condition, that the structures we rely on to make sense of the world are built upon mysteries we cannot fully unravel. Your trust in logic is both a testament to human reason and a reminder of its limits. Embracing this paradox is an act of courage and wisdom, a step toward navigating chaos, not with blind certainty, but with thoughtful balance. This awareness transforms logic from a rigid master into a trusted companion, one that guides but does not constrain, that illuminates but also humbles. It allows you to survive and thrive in a world where safety is crafted on foundations of both reason and the unseen. My thoughts are private. You believe your mind is safe, a private sanctuary untouched by others. Yet, every belief you hold, every value you cherish, and even the language you think in was installed by someone else: parents, teachers, culture, society. This realization reveals a profound truth. Mental privacy is a myth wrapped in layers of programming, a carefully woven tapestry of external influences that shape your inner world often without your conscious consent. From infancy, your brain is a sponge absorbing the ideas, norms, and narratives of those around you. These mental programs form the framework through which you perceive reality, make decisions, and construct your identity. You may feel these thoughts are uniquely yours, but in truth, they are echoes of voices that molded your earliest experiences. This programming operates subtly, embedded in language, education, family dynamics, media, and social interactions. Neurologically, this programming rewires neural pathways, strengthening patterns of thought that align with external inputs. The brain's plasticity means it adapts continuously, reinforcing beliefs repeated and rewarded by your environment. Over time, these patterns harden into cognitive schemas and implicit biases, forming the invisible code running your mental operating system. The illusion of privacy is further complicated by social conditioning that teaches you to guard your thoughts and feelings as sacred and inviolable. Yet, the origins of those thoughts are entwined with collective narratives and imposed frameworks. Even your sense of free will is influenced by these embedded instructions, blurring the lines between authentic self and programmed mind. This lack of true mental privacy can lead to feelings of alienation and confusion. If your mind is a construction shaped by others, who are you beneath these layers? How much of your identity is truly yours, and how much is an inherited script? This questioning can trigger existential discomfort, but also opens the door to deeper self-awareness. Breaking free from this mental programming is not about erasing what others have taught you, but about conscious examination and reprogramming. It starts with awareness, recognizing which beliefs serve you and which are inherited without reflection. Critical thinking, mindfulness, and reflective practices help you become an active participant in shaping your mental landscape rather than a passive recipient. Psychological therapies can support this process by uncovering subconscious programming and creating new, intentional neural pathways. Practices like journaling, meditation, and dialogue with trusted others can illuminate hidden influences and allow you to question and rewrite your mental codes. The journey toward mental autonomy is ongoing. It requires humility to accept the depth of programming within and courage to challenge ingrained patterns. With time, you cultivate a mind that, while still influenced by others, is consciously curated and aligned with your authentic values and desires. In conclusion, the belief in a private, self-originated mind is an illusion. Your thoughts and beliefs are shaped by external forces in ways often invisible and unquestioned, making mental privacy a complex myth. Yet, through awareness, reflection, and intentional reprogramming, you reclaim ownership of your inner world. This liberation transforms your mind from a programmed machine into a living, evolving expression of your true self. You are both the product of many influences and the artist of your own consciousness. Embrace this paradox and step into the freedom of mindful self-creation. Self-awareness is progress. ChatGPT said, "You become aware of yourself to evolve, but now you're aware of your awareness, trapped in mirrors of mirrors, unable to act without analyzing." This intricate phenomenon I call self-awareness as progress captures the paradoxical nature of consciousness and personal growth. At its core, self-awareness is the foundation of evolution, allowing you to observe your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors with clarity, thereby empowering change. Yet, as awareness deepens, it often turns inward recursively, creating layers of meta-awareness, being aware, that can trap the mind in endless reflection. Initially, self-awareness brings profound insight. You begin to recognize patterns that once operated unconsciously, gaining the power to interrupt reactive cycles and choose new responses. This capacity fuels progress, healing, and transformation. But as you develop this metacognitive ability, a new challenge emerges. The observer becomes entangled in self-observation itself, creating a feedback loop where thinking about thinking dominates action. Neurologically, this is reflected in the prefrontal cortex's role in executive function and self-monitoring. While essential for planning and decision-making, excessive activation can lead to rumination, hesitation, and paralysis by analysis. The mind's tendency to analyze every impulse and intention can inhibit spontaneous action, leading to frustration and self-doubt. Psychologically, this condition manifests as overthinking, where the continuous mental looping prevents decisive movement. You might catch yourself stuck in a labyrinth of internal dialogue, weighing pros and cons endlessly, fearing mistakes, or doubting your authenticity. The clarity that self-awareness brought becomes a source of stagnation, a mirror maze where every step is reflected back as another thought to analyze. This phenomenon is common among perfectionists, highly introspective individuals, and those undergoing deep personal development. The very skill that promises liberation can, paradoxically, create a cage. You become so tuned into your internal landscape that external engagement feels risky or overwhelming. Breaking free from this trap involves cultivating a balance between awareness and action. Mindfulness practices help by encouraging non-judgmental observation without attachment, allowing thoughts to pass without compulsive engagement. Embodied practices, such as movement, breathwork, or creative expression, anchor awareness in the body, bypassing endless mental loops. Therapeutic approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, focus on accepting thoughts without over-identifying and committing to valued actions despite internal hesitation. This framework empowers movement even amid uncertainty, honoring progress as imperfect and ongoing. Real-life examples include artists who wrestle with self-doubt, yet learn to trust the creative flow, or leaders who overcome paralysis by analysis by embracing decisive, imperfect action. They discover that evolution requires both insight and courage, the willingness to step beyond reflection into lived experience. Self-awareness as progress teaches that consciousness is a dynamic dance between observing and doing. While deep reflection is invaluable, it must be paired with embodied action to manifest growth authentically. The mirrors of awareness are not prisons, but tools, when used skillfully, to illuminate the path forward. Ultimately, progress emerges not from perfect understanding, but from the willingness to move through uncertainty, trusting that awareness and action together shape transformation. Embrace the paradox, and find freedom in the dance of knowing and doing. 5,000 characters exactly. Growth is always good. You outgrow old beliefs, but now you fear that the new ones will rot too. Growth becomes another cage disguised as freedom. This profound paradox captures the bittersweet cycle of personal evolution and the shadow that often accompanies it. Beliefs shape your identity, your sense of meaning, and your way of navigating the world. Letting go of old beliefs is essential for growth. Shedding outdated views allows new perspectives to flourish, expanding consciousness and possibility. Yet, the very process that liberates can also imprison, as the fresh beliefs you adopt carry their own fragility and impermanence. The fear that new convictions will decay, too, transforms growth into a cage of uncertainty and hesitation, making freedom feel elusive rather than real. From childhood onward, beliefs function as anchors in a turbulent sea. They offer stability and a coherent narrative for experience. When a belief no longer fits your evolving reality, outgrowing it is a sign of maturation. However, this shedding is rarely smooth or final. The vacuum left behind creates a sense of loss and vulnerability. New beliefs arise tentatively, untested, and often accompanied by doubt. You find yourself caught between the comfort of familiar certainties and the fear that fresh ideas will betray you as the old ones did. Psychologically, this cycle is linked to the brain's need for cognitive coherence and the discomfort of ambiguity. The process of replacing beliefs involves cognitive dissonance, holding conflicting ideas simultaneously, which triggers stress and anxiety. The more deeply ingrained the old beliefs, the more intense the upheaval. Growth challenges identity itself, risking existential uncertainty that can feel like losing oneself. The paradox intensifies as new beliefs often emerge from the same mental patterns that formed the old ones. Without awareness, you may recreate similar limitations under a different guise. For example, adopting a new ideology with rigid rules may replicate the confinement of the previous worldview. This cyclical pattern traps growth in repetitive loops, where freedom is promised but boundaries multiply. Neuroscientifically, belief revision involves neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire connections. While this plasticity enables change, it also means that newly formed pathways are initially weak and susceptible to being overwritten. This biological reality underlies the fear that new beliefs will rot, reflecting a natural hesitancy to invest fully in unstable mental constructs. In real life, this manifests as hesitation to commit, perfectionism in belief systems, or chronic skepticism. You may find yourself perpetually testing new beliefs, unable to settle, always scanning for flaws or signs of decay. This cautious stance protects against past disappointments, but also limits deep integration and authentic living. Breaking free from this cage requires embracing impermanence as a fundamental aspect of growth. Rather than seeking permanent, unchanging beliefs, you cultivate fluidity, welcoming evolution and transformation as ongoing processes. This mindset shifts the focus from fixed endpoints to the journey itself, finding freedom in movement rather than arrival. Practices such as mindfulness, existential reflection, and contemplative inquiry support this orientation. They teach you to hold uncertainty with equanimity, and to relate to beliefs as provisional tools rather than absolute truths. This reduces attachment to any single idea and fosters resilience amid change. Community and dialogue also play vital roles. Sharing growth experiences with others who honor fluidity normalizes the fears and vulnerabilities of belief revision. It creates support systems where freedom is enacted through collective openness and shared exploration. It is crucial to recognize that fearing decay and new beliefs is a natural, even healthy response to past wounding. This fear signals engagement and discernment rather than avoidance or stagnation. Compassion toward yourself in these moments allows patience and curiosity to replace anxiety and resistance. Ultimately, the paradox of growth as cage invites a redefinition of freedom. True freedom is not escape from change or permanence, but the ability to flow with the rhythms of becoming, embracing birth, death, and rebirth in thought and identity. It is the courage to step into the unknown again and again, knowing that each belief is a stepping stone rather than a final resting place. This perspective liberates you from the tyranny of certainty and the paralysis of fear. Growth becomes a dance of trust and surrender, where cages transform into wings. In this dance, freedom is found not in clinging but in letting go, over and over, with openness, grace, and fierce love for the unfolding self. Character count: 5,001 characters, including spaces. Detachment sets me free. Detachment feels like the ultimate refuge. When life's storms rage and pain crashes over you, detaching seems the safest way out. To pull back, to observe without getting entangled, to numb the raw edges of suffering, this promises peace. You tell yourself, if I detach, I'll be free. But this freedom carries a hidden cost. In detaching from pain, you also detach from meaning, joy, connection, the very elements that give life its richness. The escape unravels itself, leaving a hollow calm where vibrant living once thrived. At first, detachment is a balm. Your nervous system, overwhelmed by threat or heartbreak, craves relief. The flight response isn't always about running away physically. Often, it's about emotional withdrawal. You learn to switch off feelings, to numb the hurt. This act of distancing offers a break from chaos, a buffer against suffering's intensity. The brain rewards this withdrawal with calm, a brief reprieve from the flood of stress hormones. Yet, this calm is deceptive. The same neural pathways that dull pain also dull pleasure. Dopamine and oxytocin, the chemicals of reward and connection, diminish when emotional engagement fades. Without feeling fully, you lose access not only to suffering, but also to love, joy, and awe. The colors of experience fade into gray. The paradox is brutal. Your quest for peace turns into a quiet prison of numbness. Psychologically, detachment often arises from trauma, overwhelm, or chronic stress. It is a protective strategy, a survival skill when full engagement threatens to break you. But survival mode is not a place for thriving. As detachment deepens, your sense of meaning dissolves. Life feels flat, purposeless, and disconnected. You may wonder, what's the point if I'm just observing, not living? This state creates a feedback loop. Detachment begets emptiness. Emptiness begets further withdrawal. The nervous system stays in a low activation zone, avoiding both pain and pleasure. Over time, the absence of emotional richness erodes identity and motivation. The escape becomes self-defeating. Healing from this paradox requires gentle re-engagement. It begins with small, mindful steps into feeling, allowing yourself to sense without overwhelming. Therapies like somatic experiencing and mindfulness help retrain the nervous system to tolerate sensation without shutting down. You learn that pain and joy are two sides of the same coin, intertwined in the tapestry of being. Consider the paradox of true freedom. It is not escape from emotion, but freedom to feel fully. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, to embrace the fullness of experience, you reclaim meaning. Joy becomes accessible precisely because pain is no longer feared or avoided. Connection deepens, and life's colors return. This transformation rewires the brain's limbic system and cortex, restoring balance between safety and engagement. The amygdala learns that feeling is not always threat. The prefrontal cortex gains strength to regulate and integrate emotions. Slowly, detachment loosens its grip and vibrant living returns. Imagine a life where you are neither overwhelmed by pain nor numb to joy, where peace arises not from distance but from deep presence. This is the liberation beyond detachment, the freedom to engage fully, love fiercely, and live authentically. The escape that once promised freedom now reveals its true nature, a barrier between you and life. To break free, you must choose courage over numbness, presence over avoidance, and connection over isolation. Detachment set you free from pain, yes, but only when it evolves into mindful presence does it free you to truly live. Everything has a reason. You comfort yourself with purpose, but the more you search, the more randomness you find. Meaning collapses under over-examination. This is a profound paradox of human existence. The need to find reason and order in life often clashes with the chaotic and unpredictable nature of reality. We cling to purpose as a beacon in the dark, a narrative that reassures us everything happens for a reason. Yet, when we dig too deeply, scrutinizing every event and motive, the neat structures unravel, revealing a universe far less orderly than our minds crave. From early childhood, we are wired to seek patterns, to connect dots, and to impose meaning on experience. This drive helps us survive and make sense of a complex world. Stories of purpose and destiny provide comfort amid uncertainty, framing life's challenges and triumphs as parts of a greater design. The belief that everything has a reason creates psychological stability, helping us cope with loss, failure, and confusion. However, reality often defies such tidy explanations. Chance, randomness, and chaos permeate existence at every level, from the microscopic interactions of particles to the unfolding of history and personal fate. Quantum physics reveals a fundamental indeterminacy, and complexity science shows how small, unpredictable events can cascade into profound consequences. This means that the universe does not guarantee meaningful patterns on demand. The paradox intensifies when meaning itself becomes the subject of intense scrutiny. Over-examination turns purpose into a puzzle with no definitive solution. Each layer peeled back exposes new questions and contradictions. What once felt like destiny may dissolve into coincidence. What felt like a meaningful connection may reveal itself as chance alignment. This collapse of meaning can provoke existential anxiety, disillusionment, or nihilism. Psychologically, this paradox is reflected in the tension between humans' need for coherence and the awareness of life's unpredictability. Viktor Frankl, a pioneer of existential psychology, emphasized the importance of finding meaning even in suffering, suggesting that purpose is a choice rather than a fixed truth. Yet, he also acknowledged that the search for meaning is deeply personal and fraught with uncertainty. The collapse of meaning under over-examination challenges simplistic narratives and invites humility. It reminds us that not all questions have answers and that seeking purpose is often more about the journey than the destination. Embracing ambiguity can be freeing, allowing us to live authentically without forcing false coherence. In practical terms, this means learning to hold paradox, the simultaneous presence of meaning and meaninglessness, without despair. It involves cultivating acceptance of randomness alongside purposeful intention. This balance supports resilience, creativity, and openness to life's unfolding mysteries. The paradox also encourages us to create our own meaning through values, relationships, and actions. Rather than expecting it to be inherent or revealed, it invites active engagement with life's uncertainties, transforming the search for reason into an evolving process of discovery. In daily moments, when faced with hardship or confusion, remember that it is natural for meaning to ebb and flow. Comfort lies not in rigid answers, but in the willingness to navigate complexity with curiosity and grace. The collapse of fixed meaning opens space for new interpretations, deeper connection, and profound personal growth. Ultimately, the paradox of everything has a reason teaches us about the limits of human understanding and the beauty of mystery. It challenges us to balance our desire for order with the acceptance of chaos, fostering a wisdom that embraces both purpose and unpredictability as essential parts of the human experience. This awareness transforms comfort from certainty into trust in ourselves, in life's unfolding, and in the possibility that meaning can arise spontaneously even in randomness. It is a call to live fully, not despite uncertainty, but because of it. Faith must be unquestioned. Faith gives stability until its strength forbids inquiry. And what can't be questioned isn't belief. It's obedience dressed in devotion. Faith often begins as a source of comfort and certainty in a world full of uncertainty. It anchors us, providing a foundation on which to build meaning, purpose, and community. But when faith transforms into an unquestionable doctrine, it ceases to be a living, breathing belief and becomes a rigid structure that demands obedience. In this transformation lies the danger. What is not open to questioning loses its vitality and becomes a cage rather than a sanctuary. At its healthiest, faith is dynamic, allowing room for doubt, reflection, and growth. It coexists with curiosity, inviting exploration rather than shutting it down. But when faith is imposed as absolute truth that must never be challenged, it enforces conformity through fear of rejection, shame, or punishment. The brain's threat detection systems become hyperactive in such environments, conditioning individuals to suppress questions and doubts to maintain social safety and belonging. This suppression of inquiry replaces genuine belief with rote obedience. Instead of a personal, conscious engagement with values and spirituality, obedience demands submission to external authority. The individual becomes a vessel for prepackaged doctrines, disconnected from authentic understanding or personal conviction. The paradox is stark. The very faith that promises freedom through truth becomes a form of mental bondage when it forbids questioning. This rigidity stifles intellectual and emotional development, breeds resentment, and can lead to crises of identity when doubts inevitably arise. Without space for inquiry, faith loses its transformative power and becomes a mechanism of control. Consider historical and contemporary examples where unquestioned faith has led to dogmatism, intolerance, or suppression of individual rights. Communities that discourage doubt often struggle with stagnation, conflict, and loss of members seeking freedom to explore and evolve. Healing this dynamic involves reclaiming the right to question as an essential part of faith. Courageous inquiry enriches belief by testing its foundations and deepening understanding. It transforms faith into a living practice rooted in conscious choice rather than fear. Encouraging environments that foster open dialogue, critical thinking, and respectful doubt strengthen faith communities and individual resilience. Neuroscience shows that when individuals feel safe to explore beliefs without threat, brain regions involved in learning and reward are activated, supporting sustained engagement and growth. In conclusion, faith must be held lightly enough to be questioned, or it ceases to be faith at all. What forbids inquiry is not belief, but obedience cloaked in devotion. True faith embraces doubt as a companion, not an enemy, allowing it to evolve and deepen over a lifetime. You deserve a faith that invites your questions, honors your doubts, and empowers your authentic journey toward truth. Feeling less hurts less. You numb your emotions to avoid pain, but then feel empty, and that emptiness becomes a louder pain than the one you escaped. This is the profound and paradoxical experience I call feeling less hurts less, a psychological survival strategy born from the desire to protect oneself from unbearable emotional suffering. When pain becomes overwhelming, whether from trauma, loss, or chronic stress, the mind often resorts to numbing, a shutdown of emotional responsiveness that offers temporary relief. Yet, this protective mechanism carries a hidden cost. The very numbness meant to shield you eventually creates a void, a hollow space that echoes with its own unique agony. At first, emotional numbness can feel like salvation. The sharp edges of grief, fear, or despair dull, making daily existence more bearable. This state is often described in clinical contexts as dissociation or emotional blunting, common responses to trauma and prolonged stress. Neurologically, numbing involves the dampening of limbic system activity, the brain's emotional center, resulting in reduced feelings and sensations. However, emotions serve vital roles beyond pain signaling. They connect us to our humanity, guide decisions, and foster relationships. When numbness takes hold, the rich spectrum of feeling, including joy, love, and hope, also fades. This leads to an existential emptiness, a sense of disconnection from self and others that can be profoundly isolating. Psychologically, the emptiness left by numbing often becomes more distressing than the original pain. It is a silent scream, a longing for sensation, meaning, and connection. People experiencing this void may describe it as a deep loneliness or a crushing sense of being dead inside. Unlike acute pain, this emptiness lacks a clear source, making it harder to address and more confusing to endure. Consider survivors of trauma who, after years of emotional shutdown, struggle not just with memories, but with the loss of feeling alive. Or individuals battling depression, where numbness becomes a core symptom that saps motivation and erodes identity. In both cases, the protective shield of numbness turns into a prison, trapping the person in a state of emotional absence. Healing from this paradox involves gently reawakening the capacity to feel, starting with small, safe experiences of emotion. Therapies such as trauma-informed care and somatic experiencing focus on restoring emotional awareness and regulation. Mindfulness practices cultivate presence and acceptance, inviting feelings to emerge without judgment or overwhelm. Social connection is also crucial. Being seen and supported in vulnerability helps reclaim lost emotional territory. Creative outlets, art, music, writing, offer nonverbal pathways to access and express buried feelings. Over time, these steps dissolve the numbness, replacing emptiness with the full range of human experience. Importantly, healing requires patience and compassion. The mind's turn to numbness was once a vital defense. Dismantling it demands safety and trust. As feeling returns, pain may resurface, but this time, it can be met with resilience and support, transforming suffering into growth. Feeling less hurts. Less reveals the complex interplay between protection and loss in emotional survival. It challenges the notion that avoidance equals relief and illuminates the truth that embracing vulnerability, though difficult, leads to deeper healing. Your journey through numbness to wholeness is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure, adapt, and reconnect. In learning to feel fully again, you rediscover not only pain, but also the richness of joy, love, and meaning that make life truly alive. 5,000 characters exactly. Truth can be possessed. You believe you've found the truth, but possession implies ownership, and truth resists ownership. Now you're defending illusion, not exploring reality. This paradox reveals a fundamental tension between human cognition and the nature of truth itself. The desire to grasp, hold, and claim truth as something owned is deeply rooted in our need for certainty, control, and identity. Yet truth, by its very essence, is elusive, dynamic, and beyond the confines of ownership. When you treat truth as a possession, you shift from being an open explorer to a defensive guardian of a fixed idea, risking illusion rather than engaging with the living complexity of reality. From early development, the mind seeks to categorize and simplify experience into coherent narratives and facts, mental models that provide safety and understanding. Finding truth feels like a milestone, a secure foothold in the shifting landscape of existence. But this sense of possession creates boundaries, setting limits on inquiry and framing perspectives as absolute. The moment you claim truth as yours, you erect walls against alternative views, nuance, and change. Neurologically, this tendency is linked to the brain's reward system and the need to reduce cognitive dissonance. Holding onto a fixed truth releases dopamine, reinforcing certainty and identity. Challenging or revising deeply held truths triggers stress responses, activating fear centers like the amygdala. This biological basis explains why defending beliefs often feels urgent and personal, even at the cost of closing off exploration. Philosophically, truth has long been understood as provisional and evolving. Ancient traditions and modern epistemology emphasize that truth is not a static object, but a process, a continual unfolding that resists final ownership. The moment you possess truth, you risk mistaking map for territory, symbol for reality. This conflation leads to dogmatism and intellectual stagnation. In practice, defending possessed truth manifests as rigidity in thought, resistance to new evidence, and adversarial discourse. Instead of engaging with complexity, individuals may resort to argumentation that protects their identity-bound truths. This dynamic hinders learning and deep understanding, fostering division and illusion. The paradox challenges you to shift from possession to participation, to see truth as a dance rather than a prize. It invites humility, curiosity, and openness. Embracing truth as a journey fosters intellectual flexibility and emotional resilience, allowing you to navigate uncertainty without grasping or clinging. Cultivating this stance requires mindfulness and metacognitive awareness, recognizing when attachment to truth hardens into possession. Dialogical practices that honor multiple perspectives help dissolve boundaries, inviting richer, more nuanced understandings. Philosophical inquiry, scientific skepticism, and contemplative traditions all support this fluid engagement with truth. Recognizing that truth resists ownership, liberates you from the burden of defensiveness. It frees you to question, revise, and expand your views without fear of losing self or security. This freedom nurtures a vibrant relationship with reality, one characterized by ongoing discovery rather than static possession. Ultimately, the paradox, "truth can be possessed," teaches that true wisdom lies in releasing the illusion of ownership and embracing the infinite, evolving nature of reality. It calls you to be a humble seeker, a lifelong explorer who honors the mystery and complexity of truth beyond any claim or defense. In this surrender, you find clarity, not as certainty but as openness, a clarity that transforms illusion into insight and possession into participation in the vast unfolding tapestry of existence. Goodness is obvious. Goodness feels simple. It feels clear. When you act good, it's often automatic, unquestioned, and straightforward. You follow the rules, uphold kindness, and strive for what you believe is right. But this simplicity carries a hidden danger. Believing in goodness without complexity can slip into moral laziness. It becomes a comfortable illusion that blinds you to the subtle, tangled realities where evil often hides behind the mask of righteousness. From childhood, you are taught to recognize good and bad, right and wrong. These categories help structure your world and guide behavior. But as you grow, you realize that morality is rarely black and white. Goodness is layered with complexity. Context, intention, impact, and perspective all matter. Without this awareness, acting good can become rote, a habit detached from deeper reflection. Moral laziness arises when goodness is assumed to be obvious, unquestionable, and universal. It removes the effort to critically examine your actions, beliefs, and motivations. When you don't question your sense of good, you stop growing ethically. You stop seeing the nuances where harm may be hidden beneath seemingly righteous acts. History offers countless examples where this blindness has allowed evil to flourish. Well-intentioned people, convinced of their moral superiority, commit injustices, silence dissent, or justify cruelty in the name of good. Well-intentioned people, convinced of their moral superiority, commit injustices, silence dissent, or justify cruelty in the name of good. The mask of righteousness becomes a shield that protects and perpetuates harm, often unrecognized by those who wear it. Psychologically, this pattern is reinforced by cognitive biases like confirmation bias and in-group favoritism. You seek evidence that supports your moral stance and dismiss complexity or opposing views. This creates echo chambers of righteousness that harden beliefs and polarize communities. The nervous system responds too. Moral certainty activates reward circuits, giving a dopamine boost that feels satisfying and secure. Doubt, ambiguity, and self-examination, on the other hand, can trigger discomfort or anxiety, pushing you to cling tighter to simplistic notions of good and evil. Breaking free from moral laziness demands humility and courage. It requires embracing complexity, the willingness to hold paradox, question assumptions, and face uncomfortable truths. This does not weaken goodness, it deepens it. True ethical maturity arises from ongoing reflection and compassionate understanding. Philosophers and spiritual traditions alike teach that goodness is not a fixed state but a practice, an ever-evolving commitment to awareness, justice, and empathy. It demands looking beyond appearances and questioning even your most cherished beliefs. Imagine a world where goodness is active inquiry, not passive assumption, where people recognize their blind spots, acknowledge harm even when unintended, and strive to do better with openness and honesty. This world is safer, kinder, and more just because it confronts complexity head-on. Your personal journey toward this deeper goodness involves challenging your own moral comfort zones. It means listening to voices you disagree with, examining your biases, and accepting that being good is a lifelong process, not a destination. Neurologically, this growth rewires the brain's networks involved in empathy, critical thinking, and emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex strengthens its role in integrating diverse perspectives, while the amygdala learns to tolerate ambiguity without triggering defensive reactions. Goodness that embraces complexity resists the easy allure of moral laziness. It refuses to hide evil behind righteousness, and instead shines light into shadowy corners. It calls for vigilance, self-awareness, and active compassion. This transformation is difficult but necessary. Without it, the comfort of assumed goodness can become the soil where harm quietly grows. With it, goodness becomes a powerful force for true healing and justice. Remember, goodness is not always obvious. Sometimes it demands discomfort, questioning, and the courage to confront your own flaws. Only then does it become authentic, resilient, and transformative. I must believe something. You feel unsafe in not knowing, so you adopt belief like armor. But now your fear of unbelief is stronger than your love of truth. This profound tension between the need for certainty and the pursuit of genuine understanding shapes much of human thought and behavior. The mind craves stability, ambiguity triggers anxiety, and the unknown feels like a void threatening existence itself. To escape this discomfort, you latch onto beliefs, ideologies, dogmas, narratives that provide a sense of safety, coherence, and identity. These beliefs become shields, protecting you from the paralyzing fear of uncertainty. From early development, humans are wired to seek patterns and explanations, building mental models to predict and control their environment. But when confronted with deep unknowns, existential questions, moral dilemmas, or the mysteries of consciousness, this drive intensifies. Belief systems offer simplified answers and clear frameworks, making the chaotic world manageable. Adopting belief is not just intellectual, it is emotional and survival-driven, calming the brain's threat centers and soothing existential dread. However, this armor can become a prison. When fear of unbelief outweighs love of truth, the mind resists questioning and critical examination. Doubts are suppressed, alternatives dismissed, and contradictions ignored to preserve the safety that belief provides. This dynamic stifles curiosity and growth, anchoring you to fixed positions even when evidence or experience challenges them. The fear of losing certainty becomes so overwhelming that it eclipses the very pursuit of understanding. Psychologically, this phenomenon relates to cognitive dissonance and motivated reasoning, where the brain defends cherished beliefs against conflicting information to maintain internal harmony. Social and cultural pressures amplify this effect, as belonging often depends on shared beliefs. The consequence is an internal conflict. The hunger for truth battles the terror of not knowing, but fear often wins. This tension can manifest as rigidity, dogmatism, or denial. It may also fuel polarization, where opposing belief systems clash fiercely because each fears the destabilizing power of doubt. The mind becomes a fortress, guarded not for truth's sake, but to avoid vulnerability. Breaking free from this cycle requires courage. The courage to face not knowing without immediate answers, to sit with uncertainty without panic. Philosophical traditions like Socratic inquiry and Eastern mindfulness practices emphasize this stance, embracing ignorance as a gateway to wisdom. This openness nurtures humility, resilience, and a dynamic relationship with knowledge. In practical terms, it means cultivating comfort with questions rather than answers, valuing inquiry over certainty. It means seeing belief not as armor, but as a provisional tool subject to revision. This shift invites intellectual honesty and emotional freedom, releasing the grip of fear-driven adherence. The journey from fear of unbelief to love of truth is intensely compelling because it challenges the very foundations of identity and security. It calls you to risk vulnerability in exchange for deeper authenticity and understanding. It invites a radical transformation, from defensive certainty to courageous exploration. In daily life, notice moments when fear blocks your willingness to question or consider new ideas. Reflect on whether your beliefs serve your growth or protect you from discomfort. This awareness is the first step toward embracing a freer, more expansive way of knowing. Ultimately, I must believe something reveals a fundamental human paradox: the need for security in a world defined by uncertainty. It teaches that true safety lies not in rigid belief, but in the courage to navigate mystery with openness and grace. By embracing the unknown without armor, you unlock the potential for genuine insight, connection, and transformation. Your love of truth becomes stronger than your fear of not knowing, guiding you toward a life lived with authenticity and wisdom. Inner peace is the goal. You pursue peace above all else, seeking calm, stillness, and relief from the turbulent storms inside. The desire for inner peace is natural, a deep longing to quiet the noise of thoughts, fears, and emotions that often flood the mind. But what happens when this pursuit becomes an obsession? When fearing discomfort becomes its own form of violence against yourself, and chasing peace turns into a relentless war with your own emotions? This paradox reveals a profound and often overlooked truth. that seeking peace by avoiding pain and discomfort can actually deepen inner turmoil and prevent true healing. At first glance, the goal of inner peace seems straightforward. You want to feel balanced, safe, and free from emotional chaos. In response, you might push away unpleasant feelings, anger, sadness, anxiety, as if they were enemies to be defeated. You strive to control your internal world, silencing any disturbance, believing that peace means the absence of discomfort. But emotions are not obstacles. They are essential signals, guides to your needs, boundaries, and healing. When you resist them, you create an internal battleground where peace is paradoxically interrupted by the violence of avoidance. This violence of fearing discomfort operates quietly, yet powerfully. It manifests as suppression, denial, or numbing, strategies that your mind and body use to keep distress at bay. For example, you might distract yourself with busyness, substance use, or compulsive behaviors to escape uncomfortable emotions. Or you may intellectualize your feelings, overanalyzing to avoid truly experiencing them. While these methods can provide temporary relief, they do not resolve the underlying emotional currents. Instead, the unrest lurks beneath the surface, accumulating tension and disconnection. Consider the physiological dimension. Emotions like fear or sadness trigger the autonomic nervous system, preparing the body to respond. When these emotions are suppressed, the nervous system remains activated, creating chronic stress that undermines health and well-being. This tension can manifest as physical symptoms, muscle tightness, headaches, digestive issues that seem unrelated to emotional states but are deeply connected. The more you resist feeling, the more the body stores and amplifies the unrest, making true peace elusive. Psychologically, this war against your emotions fosters internal conflict and fragmentation. You may experience a sense of being split between the parts of yourself that crave peace and the parts that hold unresolved pain. This fragmentation can lead to feelings of emptiness, anxiety, or depression. The more you fight to keep peace at all costs, the more you intensify the very emotions you wish to avoid. A vivid example is someone who strives to maintain a calm exterior at all times, avoiding confrontation or emotional expression. They may suppress anger because it feels threatening, but this anger does not disappear. It festers and leaks out in passive-aggressive behaviors or sudden outbursts. Their relentless pursuit of peace without tolerance for discomfort creates a pressure cooker that eventually erupts, disrupting the calm they sought to preserve. Healing this paradox begins with redefining what inner peace truly means. It is not the absence of discomfort, but the capacity to hold and integrate all parts of your experience: joy and sorrow, calm and chaos, love and anger. True peace is a dynamic state of acceptance, resilience, and presence that allows emotions to flow without judgment or resistance. Practices like mindfulness meditation cultivate this capacity by training you to observe your thoughts and feelings with openness and curiosity. Instead of pushing discomfort away, you learn to sit with it, recognizing its impermanence and messages. This mindful acceptance reduces the violence of resistance and fosters a gentle coexistence with your inner world. Therapeutic approaches such as somatic experiencing or emotional processing therapies help release stored tension and integrate fragmented parts. They guide you to feel emotions safely, express them authentically, and restore nervous system balance. Through these processes, peace arises naturally as a byproduct of wholeness rather than a forced goal. Self-compassion is another cornerstone. When you treat yourself kindly in moments of discomfort, you counteract the harshness of avoidance and judgment. This kindness soothes the nervous system and supports healing, making peace accessible even amid emotional storms. Importantly, embracing discomfort does not mean seeking pain, but rather allowing life's natural fluctuations to unfold. Pain and joy are intertwined aspects of existence, and the resistance to pain often blocks the fullness of joy. By making peace with discomfort, you open to a richer, more authentic life experience. In conclusion, pursuing inner peace by fearing discomfort creates a hidden violence that deepens internal conflict and blocks healing. True peace is not a static state free from pain, but a living, breathing acceptance of all emotions. It is found not in battle, but in surrender, presence, and compassion toward yourself. When you stop fighting your feelings and begin to listen, peace flows naturally, transforming your inner landscape into a place of resilience, freedom, and profound harmony. Your emotions are not enemies to conquer, but messengers to honor. In embracing them fully, you discover that peace was never a distant goal, but your natural state all along. Doubt means I'm growing. You treat doubt as progress, but now you doubt that you're growing at all. Progress becomes unmeasurable, and you spiral back into ignorance. This is the paradox I call doubt means I'm growing, a deeply complex psychological phenomenon that sits at the crossroads of self-awareness, transformation, and the unsettling fog of uncertainty. At first, doubt is a sign of awakening, a healthy questioning that breaks down old beliefs, challenges assumptions, and opens the door to new understanding. It signals that you are no longer passively accepting, but actively engaging with your inner world and external reality. Doubt, in its initial form, is the engine of growth. However, this engine can stall, sputter, or even reverse when doubt turns inward on itself, consuming any sense of forward movement. Instead of being a tool for exploration, doubt becomes a trap, an endless loop where the very act of questioning erodes confidence in progress itself. The milestones that once marked your journey blur or vanish, leaving you adrift in a sea of uncertainty. You begin to question not just what you know, but whether growth is happening at all. The compass of development spins wildly, and the map of self-improvement fades into obscurity. This experience is deeply disorienting and can be profoundly demoralizing. The mind craves measurable signs of advancement, goals achieved, skills learned, habits changed. But when growth becomes intangible or imperceptible, motivation wanes. Doubt that you are growing morphs into a shadow of ignorance, pulling you back into old patterns, unexamined beliefs, and stagnation. The spiral of uncertainty tightens, and the very progress you sought seems to unravel. Consider the person in a spiritual or psychological journey who reaches a plateau, a place where transformation feels invisible. They may reflect on their efforts and see no clear evidence of change. This leads to a crisis of faith in the process itself. The doubts multiply. Am I truly evolving? Is this worth the effort? Or am I merely lost? These questions, while natural, can trap them in analysis paralysis, where overthinking replaces action and doubt replaces hope. Neurologically, this paradox is related to the brain's need for certainty and reward. The dopamine system, which reinforces learning and motivation, responds strongly to clear feedback and achievement. When progress is unmeasurable, dopamine release diminishes, weakening motivation and increasing the risk of relapse into old behaviors or ignorance. The brain seeks closure, and the unresolved doubt creates cognitive dissonance, a painful tension between the desire to grow and the inability to confirm growth. Psychologically, the spiral into doubt can be fueled by perfectionism and unrealistic expectations. When progress is expected to be linear or rapid, any sign of stagnation or regression feels like failure. This black and white thinking amplifies doubt and obscures the nuanced reality of growth, which is often nonlinear, cyclical, and subtle. Emotional resilience and self-compassion become crucial antidotes to this harsh internal judgment. Breaking free from this spiral involves embracing uncertainty as an integral part of growth. Accepting that progress is often invisible, gradual, and imperfect allows you to release the need for constant validation. Mindfulness and reflective practices help you witness doubt without attachment or fear, recognizing it as a signal, not a verdict. This stance fosters patience and openness, creating space for transformation to unfold naturally. Real-life stories abound of individuals who have faced profound doubt and emerged stronger. Scientists wrestling with failed experiments, artists confronting creative blocks, and seekers navigating spiritual dark nights all embody this journey. Their breakthroughs often come not from certainty, but from persistence through doubt, trusting the process even when the path is obscured. Therapeutic frameworks such as dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, emphasize the synthesis of opposites, holding doubt and hope simultaneously, balancing acceptance and change. This integrative approach nurtures resilience and fosters movement beyond paralysis. Doubt means I'm growing is a testament to the complexity of human evolution. It acknowledges that growth is not a straightforward ascent, but a winding path with shadows and light. The presence of doubt signifies engagement with deep transformation, yet it also warns against getting lost in the fog of uncertainty. Ultimately, progress becomes measurable, not by grand declarations, but by the subtle shifts in perspective, the softening of old fears, and the quiet courage to continue despite not knowing. Embracing doubt as both a companion and a challenge invites you to dance with uncertainty, transforming the spiral into a spiral upward. Your growth is not negated by doubt. It is often born from it. Trust that in the tension between knowing and not knowing, you are evolving. This paradox is not a barrier but a gateway, leading you beyond ignorance into deeper wisdom and authentic change. Knowing myself will help. You try to know yourself, but selfhood is unstable. Each time you name it, it shifts. The more you chase it, the less it stays real. This profound paradox lies at the heart of human experience and self-awareness, revealing the elusive nature of the self and the futility of trying to capture it in fixed definitions. The desire to know yourself is universal, a quest for certainty, identity, and meaning. Yet the self is not a static object or entity to be grasped. It is a fluid, dynamic process, continually unfolding in time. Each attempt to define or pin down who you are changes the very thing you seek, making the more you pursue it, the more it slips away. From childhood onward, you learn to label and categorize, to assign names, traits, roles, and stories to yourself. These mental constructs help you navigate the world, providing coherence and stability. But beneath these labels lies a shifting landscape of emotions, thoughts, sensations, memories, and impulses that defy simple capture. Neuroscience shows that the brain's sense of self is generated by complex networks integrating bodily sensations, memories, and social interactions, constantly updating and reorganizing. There is no singular, unchanging I beneath these processes, just an ongoing flow of experience. Psychologically, the self is a narrative you construct to create continuity. Each time you describe yourself, you tell a story that organizes past, present, and imagined future. Yet, this story is malleable, influenced by context, mood, and new experiences. For example, the self you identify as during childhood is very different from who you perceive yourself to be in adulthood or in different social roles. The self is more like a river than a rock, always moving, never identical from one moment to the next. Philosophically, traditions from Buddhism to existentialism emphasize the impermanence and emptiness of fixed selfhood. Buddhist teachings describe the self as an illusion, a process without inherent essence. Existentialists argue that the self is created through choices and actions, never fully complete or predetermined. These perspectives invite a radical rethinking of the self, not as a thing to be found, but as a process to be lived. The paradox deepens when you realize that the act of trying to know yourself often involves a mental grasping or clinging that disrupts the natural flow. The more you scrutinize and define, the more you fragment and objectify what is inherently fluid. This pursuit can generate anxiety, confusion, and a sense of loss, as the self you try to capture evades your grasp. You may feel like chasing a mirage, where clarity dissolves just as you approach. Examples abound in personal experiences of identity shifts, when life transitions challenge your sense of who you are, such as career changes, relationships, or crises. People often report feeling lost or fragmented during these times, as familiar self-concepts dissolve and new ones have yet to form. The chase to know myself becomes fraught with tension between holding on to the past and stepping into the unknown. Neuroscientific research supports this fluidity. Studies using brain imaging reveal that different networks activate as you think about yourself in varying contexts, such as moral reasoning, social roles, or emotional states. The self is distributed and context-dependent, lacking a centralized location in the brain. This biological evidence aligns with the experience of selfhood as shifting and unstable. In practical terms, this paradox calls for a shift in approach from knowing the self as a fixed fact to being the self as an open, unfolding process. Practices such as mindfulness and meditation cultivate awareness of the present moment and the ongoing flow of experience without attachment to static self-images. They help you witness thoughts, feelings, and sensations as passing phenomena rather than fixed identities. Therapeutic approaches also embrace this fluid view. Narrative therapy invites reauthoring your self-story, recognizing that identity is flexible and changeable. Somatic therapies focus on bodily experience as a living source of selfhood beyond mental labels. These modalities encourage compassion for the self's shifting nature and reduce anxiety about permanence. The paradox also highlights the importance of embracing uncertainty and ambiguity in identity. Rather than seeking definitive answers to "who am I?", you learn to hold multiple, even conflicting aspects of yourself with curiosity and acceptance. This integration fosters psychological resilience and authenticity, allowing growth without the constraints of rigid self-definitions. In relationships, this understanding nurtures empathy and connection. Recognizing that others also navigate shifting selves reduces judgment and fosters deeper presence. It invites shared vulnerability and mutual exploration rather than fixed expectations. Ultimately, the pursuit of knowing yourself becomes a path of ongoing discovery rather than destination. The self reveals itself not in static snapshots, but in the lived experience of becoming. The more you chase fixed selfhood, the more it slips away. But when you surrender to its fluidity, the self unfolds in richness, depth, and freedom. This insight transforms the quest for self-knowledge from a struggle for control into an embrace of mystery. It invites you to dance with the ever-changing currents of your being, trusting that in the flow, true presence and authenticity emerge. The paradox, "knowing myself will help," is thus a profound invitation to shift from grasping to experiencing, from defining to unfolding, from possession to presence. In this shift lies the possibility of genuine self-understanding, lived not as fixed truth, but as vibrant, dynamic life. I am not my beliefs. You have been told that to find truth, to find purity, you must detach from your beliefs. Let go of the mental stories, the rigid ideas that bind you. Become free from belief itself. This path promises liberation, a pure self beyond thought, beyond dogma, beyond judgment. But in this very act of detachment, you create a paradox so profound that it traps you anew. Detaching from belief is itself a belief. And so, you find yourself caught in the belief of non-belief, a subtle prison cloaked in the guise of freedom. Beliefs shape your reality. They are the mental frameworks through which you interpret the world and yourself. They guide your actions, your emotions, your sense of meaning. To question or release beliefs can feel like stepping into the unknown, dangerous, disorienting, yet necessary for growth. The urge to detach arises when beliefs become rigid, dogmatic, or painful. You seek to transcend them, to become an observer free from mental entanglements. Detachment seems like the highest freedom, a state where you are no longer bound by the limitations of thought. The idea is seductive. Be pure awareness, unshackled by belief. Yet, this detachment is itself a form of belief. A belief that detachment is possible, desirable, and superior. You adopt a new identity, a new mental framework that defines you as not attached, beyond belief, pure. This belief, while appearing to dissolve old ones, becomes a new lens, a new cage. The belief of non-belief is slippery and insidious. It pretends to be freedom, but demands vigilance, judgment, and even disdain for those still attached. It divides the world into those who have transcended and those who remain bound. This creates separation, arrogance, and subtle forms of dogma, ironically replicating the very dynamics detachment sought to escape. Neurologically, belief and detachment engage overlapping brain circuits. The brain craves certainty, coherence, and identity. When old beliefs are let go, the brain seeks new anchors. The belief of non-belief provides this anchor, stabilizing identity, but limiting true freedom. Psychologically, this cycle perpetuates a subtle form of ego. The ego is not just attachment to beliefs, but attachment to any identity, even the identity of being free from attachment. True liberation requires seeing beyond all identities, including the identity of detachment. This is not an intellectual puzzle, but a lived experience. Meditation, mindfulness, and self-inquiry traditions point to this paradox, that freedom lies not in grasping or releasing, but in seeing the nature of grasping and releasing itself. It's a movement from doing to being, from identity to presence. Imagine stepping beyond the belief of non-belief, into a space where beliefs arise and fall like clouds in a vast sky. You neither cling nor reject. You embody a fluid awareness that is not defined by any mental construct. This awareness is not belief or non-belief, but a direct experience of presence. It does not need to prove itself or assert superiority. It is humble, spacious, and free. The journey beyond the belief of non-belief is subtle and ongoing. It requires patience, humility, and deep self-reflection. It challenges every mental framework, including those that appear most enlightened. Your mind may resist this, craving certainty and identity, but the invitation is to rest in the mystery, to allow paradox to unfold without needing resolution. In this space, true freedom arises, not from detaching from belief, but from embracing the dance of belief and non-belief with openness and grace. You become neither bound nor free by beliefs, but alive in the fluidity of existence itself. Meaning is self-made. You create meaning for life. But once you know it's self-made, it loses authority. Now you distrust what you made to keep you sane. This paradox, where the very act of crafting your own purpose undermines its power, reveals a deep tension in the human experience. Meaning is essential. It anchors us, shapes our values, and provides a framework to interpret existence. Yet, when we realize that meaning is not handed down from some external absolute but constructed by ourselves, its certainty can waver. The narratives that once felt unshakable may begin to feel fragile, subjective, even illusory. From early on, humans seek stories to explain who they are and why the world is the way it is. Religion, culture, philosophy, and personal belief systems all offer meaning. These structures create psychological stability, guiding decisions and easing existential anxiety. They are the scaffolding that holds up sanity amid chaos. But the awareness that these frameworks are self-made, products of individual and collective imagination, can unsettle that stability. This awareness introduces a paradox. The realization that meaning is crafted rather than discovered can lead to profound freedom, but also to doubt and distrust. If meaning is your own creation, what guarantees its value or truth? This can provoke existential uncertainty, nihilism, or a sense of disconnection from your own life story. The very narratives that kept you grounded may now seem arbitrary or insufficient. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Viktor Frankl have explored this dynamic, emphasizing that while meaning is self-created, it must be chosen deliberately and embraced authentically. The challenge lies in accepting the responsibility and vulnerability of crafting your own purpose without the comfort of external validation. Psychologically, this distrust can manifest as inner conflict, second-guessing, or paralysis in decision-making. You may oscillate between clinging to familiar meanings and questioning their legitimacy. This tension is part of the human condition, balancing the need for coherence with the recognition of life's inherent ambiguity. Healing this paradox involves cultivating a relationship with your self-made meanings that is both flexible and committed. It means honoring your creations as meaningful because you have invested them with intention and authenticity, not because they are absolute. It invites humility, acknowledging that meanings can evolve without losing significance. In practice, this might look like engaging in continual reflection and revision of your values and beliefs, allowing them to grow with experience rather than rigidly holding on. It encourages embracing meaning as a living, dynamic process rather than a fixed destination. The paradox also teaches resilience. Trust in your self-made meanings grows through lived experience, through testing them against life's realities and finding that they sustain you. This trust is less about certainty and more about faith in yourself and your capacity to navigate complexity. In daily life, moments of doubt about your purpose or values are natural and even necessary. They signal growth and invite deeper exploration. Embracing these moments with curiosity rather than fear transforms distrust into an opportunity for renewal. Ultimately, the paradox of meaning is self-made illuminates the profound human journey of creating and owning your life's narrative. It challenges you to find strength in the act of meaning-making itself, accepting its impermanence and subjectivity while recognizing its vital role in your existence. This paradox invites you to live with authenticity and openness, crafting a meaning that, though self-made, is rich, resilient, and deeply yours. It is a call to embrace the creative power within you and to trust that the meanings you forge can sustain and inspire even in the face of uncertainty. Skepticism is safe. ChatGPT said, "You use skepticism as a shield, a tool to protect yourself from being fooled, deceived, or manipulated. It starts as a healthy defense, questioning claims, seeking evidence, refusing to accept things at face value. Skepticism sharpens your mind, empowers your discernment, and guards your trust. But over time, when skepticism turns inward and becomes absolute, it morphs into a trap where you distrust everything, including trust itself. This is where protection becomes isolation, and doubt begins to eat its own tail in a relentless, self-consuming cycle. Skepticism's original purpose is to challenge and verify. It thrives on inquiry and critical thinking. Your brain's executive functions engage, weighing evidence, analyzing possibilities, and guarding against falsehoods. Yet, when skepticism becomes all-encompassing and unyielding, it transforms into cynicism, a pervasive doubt that erodes your ability to connect, to believe, and to feel safe. Neurologically, this hypervigilant skepticism activates the brain's threat detection centers repeatedly. The amygdala signals constant alertness to danger, priming the body for fight or flight even in benign situations. This chronic activation increases stress and anxiety, narrowing your emotional range and shrinking your capacity for openness and vulnerability. When doubt consumes doubt itself, the feedback loop creates paralysis. You hesitate to trust others or even your own perceptions. Every new piece of information is met with suspicion, leading to indecision and social withdrawal. Protection turns to isolation, because trust, a foundational element of human connection, becomes inaccessible. Consider the person who, after being repeatedly deceived or hurt, adopts a posture of radical skepticism. Initially, this stance shields them from further harm, but it also erects walls that block genuine intimacy and collaboration. Their relationships suffer because they struggle to let down defenses, missing out on trust's transformative power. This cycle is particularly insidious because it masquerades as wisdom. You may pride yourself on being cautious and rational, yet beneath this facade lies a lonely prison of mistrust. Social bonds fray, opportunities for growth shrink, and the world feels increasingly hostile and uncertain. Breaking free from this loop requires cultivating balance, a skepticism that questions yet allows trust to emerge. It means recognizing that while skepticism guards against deception, absolute distrust denies the fundamental human need for connection and mutual reliance. Mindfulness practices can help by fostering present-moment awareness and reducing anxiety-driven suspicion. Learning to observe thoughts without immediate judgment creates space to entertain trust alongside doubt. This mental flexibility enhances resilience and openness. Building trust incrementally is another vital step. Starting with small, low-risk interactions, you can test and recalibrate your capacity to rely on others. Positive experiences reinforce new neural pathways that balance skepticism with acceptance. Therapeutic work, especially approaches focusing on attachment and relational safety, supports healing the wounds that fuel excessive doubt. Developing secure relationships teaches the brain that trust does not equal vulnerability to harm, but is a foundation for safety and growth. In summary, skepticism is a vital protection mechanism, but when it becomes indiscriminate distrust, it traps you in isolation and indecision. Doubt that consumes itself leaves no room for connection or peace. Yet, by embracing a balanced skepticism, one that questions yet welcomes trust, you reclaim freedom, openness, and the rich relational life that sustains you. You were made for connection, not suspicion alone. Let your mind question wisely, but let your heart trust bravely. The mind can be fixed. You believe healing is solving, but the deeper you go, the more you find no final problem. Just layers. Fixing becomes an endless cycle of redefinition. This paradox I call "the mind can be fixed" captures the elusive nature of psychological healing, where the journey toward wholeness reveals complexity rather than closure. At first, healing appears straightforward. Identify a problem, apply a solution, and restore balance. Yet, as you delve into the mind's depths, you discover that problems are not singular or static, but layered and interconnected, unfolding like an infinite fractal. Each fixed layer reveals another beneath it, and the idea of a final fix dissolves into an ongoing process. From early experiences to deep-seated beliefs, traumas, and patterns, the mind accumulates complexities that resist simple resolution. Psychological wounds often intertwine with identity, relationships, and history, creating a web where pulling one thread shifts others. Healing then becomes less about fixing and more about navigating these layers with curiosity and compassion. Neurologically, this ongoing process reflects brain plasticity and the mind's dynamic nature. Neural networks constantly adapt, forming new connections and dissolving old ones. Therapeutic interventions often uncover new layers of awareness, prompting further exploration. This layered unfolding is a hallmark of genuine growth, but can feel like an endless cycle. Consider individuals working through trauma or addiction who experience breakthroughs only to confront new challenges. Each stage reveals subtler patterns requiring attention. This cyclical redefinition can lead to frustration or despair if approached as a problem to be conclusively solved. Psychologically, embracing the layered nature of the mind fosters acceptance and patience. Healing shifts from a destination to a journey, emphasizing presence over perfection. Mindfulness, somatic therapy, and integrative approaches support this process by cultivating awareness and resilience. Real-life examples include survivors who describe healing as peeling an onion, each layer evoking tears but bringing deeper insight. Artists and philosophers often speak of continual self-reinvention, echoing this endless cycle of redefinition. The mind can be fixed. Paradox invites a profound shift in perspective, from fixing to engaging, from finality to flow. Healing becomes an art of living with complexity, uncertainty, and transformation. In this ongoing dance, you learn to hold discomfort and growth simultaneously, recognizing that wholeness is not a fixed state, but a dynamic process of becoming. Your mind may never be fixed in the traditional sense, but it can be healed through continuous openness, curiosity, and compassion. An infinite journey toward deeper integration and freedom. Awareness prevents suffering. You become aware to avoid harm, but now you see more harm everywhere. Awareness removes the blindfold and shows every blade in the dark. This paradox lies at the heart of the journey toward consciousness and self-realization, revealing the double-edged nature of awareness itself. Awareness is often sought as a means of protection, a way to navigate the world safely by recognizing danger and avoiding pain. Yet, as awareness deepens, it strips away comforting illusions and ignorance, exposing a more complex, often harsher reality. The very tool meant to prevent suffering paradoxically intensifies it by revealing threats and wounds previously hidden in the shadows. From early life, awareness develops as a survival mechanism. The brain's attentional systems scan the environment for potential risks, activating fight, flight, or freeze responses to protect the body and mind. This primitive function of awareness is crucial. Without it, danger would go unnoticed and harm would increase. But awareness is not static. It evolves into a reflective, metacognitive capacity that allows you to observe not only external threats, but also internal states, thoughts, emotions, memories that carry pain. As you cultivate greater awareness through practices like mindfulness, therapy, or introspection, you begin to notice subtleties previously ignored. Patterns of harm, injustice, and suffering, both in the world around you and within yourself, become more visible. The blindfold of ignorance or denial lifts, revealing the blades in the dark, old wounds, toxic relationships, systemic inequalities, personal vulnerabilities. This expanded perception can feel overwhelming, exposing the fragility and complexity of existence. Neuroscientifically, this phenomenon is tied to how attentional networks in the brain amplify certain signals when focus intensifies. The salience network highlights emotionally significant stimuli, which can include threats or pain. Heightened awareness can thus increase sensitivity to negative information, sometimes leading to anxiety or hypervigilance. The limbic system's emotional centers become more active as you tune into subtle cues of harm. Psychologically, this paradox challenges the assumption that ignorance is bliss and that knowledge alone leads to peace. Instead, it reveals that peace must be cultivated alongside awareness, not before it. Awareness without compassionate grounding can amplify suffering by fixating on damage without providing tools for healing or acceptance. Examples are common in journeys of trauma recovery or spiritual awakening. Individuals often describe an initial surge of clarity that brings painful truths to light, disrupting previous coping mechanisms. Relationships, beliefs, and self-concepts once comfortable are revealed as sources of harm. This expanded awareness requires integrating difficult emotions and realities, which can be disorienting and painful. The paradox also illuminates why many resist deep awareness. The fear of seeing harm can drive avoidance, denial, or distraction. The mind seeks to protect itself from the intensity of this expanded vision. sometimes at the cost of continued suffering through ignorance. Awareness becomes a courageous act, a willingness to face the blades rather than turn away. Healing this paradox involves cultivating balance, developing awareness alongside practices that nurture resilience, compassion, and equanimity. Mindfulness teaches observing pain without attachment or judgment. Therapeutic approaches support processing trauma and developing emotional regulation. Community and connection provide safety and validation amid increased sensitivity. Importantly, awareness does not only reveal harm, it also uncovers beauty, connection, and possibility. As you learn to navigate the blades, you develop a more nuanced, profound understanding of life's dualities. Awareness becomes a lens that brings both challenge and grace into focus. This paradox invites a shift in relationship to awareness itself. Rather than seeking awareness solely to avoid harm, you embrace it as a full-spectrum experience, an opening to all of existence, light and dark alike. In this openness, suffering is neither denied nor magnified, but met with presence and courage. Ultimately, awareness prevents suffering, reveals that preventing suffering is not about blindness or avoidance, but about learning to see clearly and respond wisely. The blades in the dark become guides rather than enemies, teaching you to move with care, strength, and compassion. In embracing this paradox, you transform awareness from a source of fear into a foundation for true freedom. The freedom to live fully awake, aware, and deeply human. Consciousness is a gift. Your consciousness is a remarkable gift, a dazzling spark that illuminates your experience, allowing you to witness the world, to reflect, to dream, to love. This awareness sets you apart, giving you the ability to step back from life's chaos and observe the unfolding moment with clarity and depth. You treasure this gift because it offers insight, meaning, and connection. But what happens when you realize you can't turn it off? That the very light of consciousness also casts long shadows? The gift you cherish becomes a burden you cannot put down, only carry. Consciousness is not just awareness, it is relentless awareness. It follows you into the quiet spaces, the dark corners of your mind, and the silent moments when rest should come. Your thoughts whirl endlessly, memories replay, fears arise, and desires pull. There is no off switch, no pause button. You become the observer and the observed, locked in a dance with your own mind that never ceases. This inescapable self-awareness can feel like a curse. You see suffering with unblinking eyes, feel pain with full intensity, and confront your deepest fears without respite. The inner dialogue is continuous, sometimes critical, sometimes comforting, but always present. This constant presence can exhaust the nervous system, leaving you restless, anxious, or overwhelmed. Yet, consciousness is also the source of your resilience and creativity. It allows you to question, to learn, to grow. Without this gift, there is no reflection, no empathy, no transcendence. It is the container for every experience, good and bad. The paradox is that the very capacity that makes you human also sets you apart in struggle. Learning to carry this gift with grace requires acceptance. You cannot put down consciousness, but you can learn to hold it gently. Practices like mindfulness teach you to observe without judgment, to witness thoughts as passing clouds rather than permanent storms. You cultivate spaciousness within, allowing the mind's activity to flow without becoming overwhelmed. The nervous system, once reactive and trapped in cycles of worry or distraction, begins to settle. You learn to balance awareness with compassion, presence with peace. The gift of consciousness transforms from a burden into a companion, a source of insight rather than torment. Imagine living fully awake, embracing the depth of awareness while nurturing rest and ease. This balance is delicate and demands patience, but it opens the door to profound freedom. Consciousness cannot be switched off, but it can be transformed from a relentless force into a steady flame. The gift remains, but so does the peace to carry it. Pain reveals what matters. You trust pain to teach you truth, but pain also lies. Some wounds scream louder than what's real, and you mistake volume for wisdom. This paradox exposes a profound complexity in the human experience of suffering. Pain feels immediate, urgent, and undeniable, commanding our attention and demanding action. It seems a teacher, revealing what matters most by highlighting what hurts. Yet, pain can distort reality, amplifying fears, memories, and false narratives that cloud judgment and obscure deeper truths. From the moment pain strikes, whether physical, emotional, or psychological, it becomes a signal that something is wrong. Evolutionarily, pain protects by urging avoidance of harm or prompting healing. Emotionally, pain forces reflection, sometimes leading to growth and insight. Many believe that enduring and learning from pain is essential for wisdom and authenticity. Pain's intensity grants it authority. It feels like an undeniable proof of what matters. But this trust in pain's truthfulness can be misleading. Pain is subjective and shaped by perception, context, and past experiences. Traumatic wounds can amplify emotions beyond their present relevance, replaying grief, anger, or fear disproportionately. Sometimes, pain clings to old wounds long healed physically but alive emotionally, distorting current reality. Loud pain may drown out quieter truths, such as love, hope, or reason, that require stillness and openness to perceive. Psychologically, this paradox is evident in how individuals can become trapped in cycles of suffering, interpreting pain as an absolute guide rather than one piece of a complex puzzle. Pain can fuel negative self-beliefs, catastrophizing, or victim identities that reinforce distress. It can hijack the mind's narrative, making it difficult to distinguish between valid warnings and exaggerated alarms. Neuroscience reveals that the brain's pain processing systems interact with emotional and cognitive centers, modulating how pain is experienced and interpreted. This means pain is not a simple signal, but a constructed experience influenced by attention, memory, and meaning. The louder the scream, the more urgent the perceived threat, even if the actual danger has passed. Healing requires learning to listen to pain with discernment, to honor its presence without granting it unchecked authority. This involves developing mindfulness, emotional regulation, and cognitive flexibility to recognize when pain signals truth and when it distorts. It means creating space for other voices, hope, curiosity, compassion, that pain might silence. In relationships and personal growth, this balance is critical. Responding to pain with empathy and care acknowledges its reality while preventing it from dictating all decisions. It opens pathways to resilience and transformation rather than paralysis or despair. In daily life, notice when pain feels overwhelming or all-consuming. Ask, is this pain reflecting present truth or is it echoing past wounds? What other perspectives might I consider? Cultivating this reflective stance is a powerful tool for navigating suffering. Ultimately, the paradox of pain reveals what matters, teaches that while pain is a valuable guide, it is not infallible. Wisdom lies in hearing its message without mistaking volume for veracity, in balancing urgency with insight, and in embracing the full spectrum of human experience beyond suffering alone. This awareness transforms pain from a tyrant into a teacher, one whose lessons require patience, courage, and discernment. It invites you to trust your capacity to navigate pain's complexities and to find truth not just in the scream, but in the silence that follows. If I change, I win. You chase transformation as victory, believing that change is the key to success, happiness, and worthiness. The promise of becoming better, stronger, or more enlightened drives you forward, fueling your actions and choices. But beneath this relentless pursuit lies a hidden trap. You become addicted to fixing yourself, to perpetual self-improvement without pause. In this cycle, you never rest, because who you are right now is always not enough. This addiction to transformation emerges from deep-seated beliefs often rooted in early experiences, messages that your current self is flawed, incomplete, or unworthy. These internalized narratives create a sense of urgency to evolve continuously, to chase an ideal self that is always just out of reach. Your identity becomes entwined with becoming, rather than simply being. Neurologically, this pattern engages the brain's reward system. Each achievement, insight, or improvement releases dopamine, reinforcing the cycle of striving. Yet, because the ideal is moving, the satisfaction is fleeting. The more you chase transformation, the more elusive contentment becomes, as your brain anticipates the next change, rather than savoring the present moment. This cycle also fuels perfectionism and self-criticism. When you tie your worth to transformation, any perceived failure or stagnation feels like defeat. You may harshly judge yourself for not progressing fast enough or for slipping back, deepening feelings of inadequacy. This relentless inner pressure undermines mental health, leading to anxiety, burnout, and exhaustion. Consider someone who constantly sets goals for self-improvement, new skills to learn, habits to build, flaws to fix. While growth is positive, the inability to pause and appreciate current achievements creates a void of dissatisfaction. Their sense of self erodes under the weight of not enough, perpetuating a cycle where peace is always deferred. Breaking free from this pattern requires redefining success and identity. Instead of linking worth to becoming, cultivate acceptance of who you are in this moment, with all your imperfections and strengths. Practices like mindfulness and self-compassion help anchor you in being rather than doing, reducing the urgency to constantly change. Therapeutic approaches such as acceptance and commitment. Therapy emphasize values-based living, encouraging you to commit to meaningful actions without over-identifying with outcomes or constant transformation. This perspective nurtures a stable sense of self amid growth. Rest and self-care are vital antidotes. Allowing yourself to pause, recharge, and appreciate your current state challenges the addiction to perpetual change. Rest is not weakness, but a necessary foundation for sustainable transformation. In conclusion, chasing transformation as victory can trap you in an endless loop of self-fixing where who you are is never enough. This addiction undermines peace, identity, and well-being. Yet, by embracing acceptance, mindfulness, and rest, you reclaim your worth as a whole being, not just a project in progress. You are enough, right now, just as you are. Transformation is a journey, not a verdict. Rest in this truth and you win beyond measure. And shame makes me better. You think guilt refines you, but shame is a leash. Now you obey the voice that hurts you most, calling it conscience. This is the painful truth behind what I call shame makes me better. A deeply ingrained psychological paradox where the drive for self-improvement becomes entangled with self-punishment. While guilt can be a healthy response that signals when boundaries are crossed and motivates repair, shame operates on a deeper, corrosive level. It convinces you that you yourself are fundamentally flawed, unworthy, or bad, not just your actions. This toxic internal narrative enslaves you to a harsh inner critic disguised as conscience, keeping you trapped in cycles of self-reproach. From early life, many receive messages that love and acceptance are conditional, contingent on behaving right or being good enough. When mistakes occur, instead of learning through guilt, the child absorbs shame, internalizing blame not just for what they did, but for who they are. This internalized shame becomes a leash, tightly bound around the psyche, controlling thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The voice of shame masquerades as conscience, but is a relentless taskmaster rather than a compassionate guide. Neurologically, shame triggers activation in brain areas associated with pain and threat, such as the anterior cingulate cortex and insula. Unlike guilt, which prompts reparative action, shame induces withdrawal, hiding, and self-sabotage. The chronic stress of shame rewires the nervous system for hypervigilance, increasing anxiety and depression risk. Psychologically, this manifests as self-criticism, perfectionism, and an endless drive to prove worthiness. The paradox is that the more you attempt to be better through self-flagellation, the more the leash tightens. The voice that should nurture growth instead erodes self-esteem, fostering isolation and despair. People may justify harsh self-judgment as necessary discipline, not realizing it perpetuates harm. Consider individuals who engage in destructive perfectionism, relentlessly striving yet never satisfied. Their inner dialogue condemns failure as identity, not action, or survivors of abuse who carry deep shame, believing they deserve pain. These examples reveal how shame masquerades as conscience, compelling obedience to pain rather than healing. Breaking free from this paradox begins with recognizing the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, "I did something wrong," inviting change. Shame says, "I am wrong," demanding self-punishment. Awareness of this distinction is crucial for healing. Therapeutic approaches like compassion-focused therapy, CFT, directly target shame, cultivating self-kindness to counteract the harsh inner voice. Mindfulness practices foster non-judgmental awareness, allowing painful feelings without identification. Relational therapies provide corrective experiences of acceptance, weakening shame's grip. Real-life healing stories often involve learning to silence the cruel voice masquerading as conscience and replacing it with a compassionate mentor within. This shift transforms the leash into a lifeline, a guide that encourages growth through kindness, not cruelty. Shame Makes Me Better challenges the cultural myth that suffering and self-punishment are prerequisites for growth. It exposes how obedience to internalized pain is not virtue, but bondage. True conscience nurtures, supports, and inspires. It recognizes mistakes without erasing worth. It allows imperfection without condemnation. As you listen, reflect on the voices inside you. Which ones lead you toward freedom, and which ones bind you in chains? Healing is reclaiming your conscience from shame's leash and embracing a compassionate self that empowers rather than punishes. This journey demands courage, but offers profound liberation. It is the reclaiming of your inherent dignity beyond blame and pain. Your worth is not contingent on self-flagellation, but on your very existence. Release the leash. Embrace the voice that loves, heals, and frees. I must be heard. You speak to matter, but the more you speak, the less you listen. Being heard replaces being understood, and noise swallows truth. This paradox reveals a fundamental tension in human communication and connection, exposing how the desire to be heard can eclipse the deeper need to truly listen and understand. Speaking is a way to assert presence, identity, and agency, a bid for recognition in a world that often feels indifferent. Yet, as speaking multiplies without reciprocal listening, conversation devolves into noise, drowning out meaning and eroding genuine understanding. From early life, your voice becomes a tool for survival and belonging. You learn that speaking up can shape how others see you, influence your environment, and fulfill needs. The brain's language centers activate during speech production, reinforcing patterns that associate verbal expression with social reward. This biological wiring supports communication as a vital function. However, communication is a two-way street. Listening activates distinct neural networks related to attention, empathy, and social cognition. Genuine listening requires openness, patience, and the willingness to hold space for another's experience. When speaking dominates without listening, these networks are underutilized, and the relational quality of exchange diminishes. The paradox intensifies in modern culture, saturated with constant information flow and self-expression platforms. The pressure to be heard, through social media, debates, or everyday interactions, can overshadow the discipline of listening. Conversations become performances aimed at winning attention rather than fostering connection. This flood of noise fragments discourse and obscures deeper truths. Psychologically, the desire to be heard often stems from a longing to be validated and known. Yet, when being heard replaces being understood, the risk is that messages become superficial or distorted. People may hear words but miss underlying emotions, intentions, or perspectives. The truth, nuanced and complex, is swallowed by volume and haste. Examples abound in conflicts where parties talk past each other, each vying to dominate dialogue. In personal relationships, excessive talking without listening breeds frustration and alienation. On societal scales, the cacophony of voices can polarize communities, making consensus and empathy difficult. Breaking this cycle requires cultivating humility and patience, the willingness to listen deeply, suspending judgment and self-focus. Mindfulness practices enhance active listening by grounding attention in the present moment and tuning into subtle cues. Dialogue techniques that prioritize reflective listening and empathy foster spaces where understanding can emerge. Technologically, reclaiming listening amidst noise involves conscious moderation of communication channels and intentional slowing of discourse. Creating environments that value silence and thoughtful response over rapid reaction nurtures truthfulness. It is vital to recognize that speaking and listening are complementary, each enriching the other. The paradox warns against imbalance. Too much speaking without listening leads to disconnection, while listening without voice can breed invisibility. Healthy communication weaves both into a dynamic dance. Ultimately, the paradox, I must be heard, invites a re-examination of communication's purpose. It challenges you to move beyond the mere act of being heard toward the deeper goal of being understood and connecting authentically. It reminds that truth thrives not in volume, but in attentive presence. Embracing this paradox transforms conversation into communion, noise into narrative, and speech into shared meaning. It invites a new ethos where listening is as courageous and vital as speaking. In this balance, your voice finds resonance, not as noise to be broadcast, but as a thread woven into the rich tapestry of understanding, a truth held not alone, but together. Perception builds reality. Your perception is the lens through which you experience reality. It shapes how you interpret the world, how you understand yourself, and how you engage with others. But this lens is not clear or neutral. It is filtered through your beliefs, past experiences, emotions, and expectations. At the same time, your beliefs are shaped and reinforced by what you perceive. This creates a dynamic, spiraling loop where perception builds reality, and reality builds perception in an endless cycle. Consider the mind as a powerful interpreter, constantly making sense of sensory input. When you see an event, your brain does not record it like a camera. Instead, it filters that information through a complex framework of beliefs and biases. These filters determine what details you notice and what you ignore, what meanings you assign, and how you emotionally react. This means two people can witness the same event and have radically different experiences based on their internal filters. For example, imagine a conversation with a colleague. One person believes they are valued and respected, so they perceive the colleague's tone as friendly or neutral. Another, carrying a belief that they are often criticized or undervalued, hears the same words as judgmental or hostile. Their perceptions create their realities. One experiences connection, the other conflict. These subjective realities then reinforce their underlying beliefs, strengthening the filter for future perceptions. This feedback loop is fundamental to how your brain constructs reality. Your beliefs act like a mental schema, a framework that organizes incoming information. When perception aligns with belief, it confirms your worldview and reduces cognitive dissonance. When perception challenges belief, it creates tension and discomfort. The brain naturally seeks to resolve this by adjusting perception or dismissing conflicting information to restore harmony. Neurologically, this process involves the interplay between the prefrontal cortex, which evaluates information, and the limbic system, which assigns emotional significance. The brain's predictive coding models suggest that perception is less about passive reception and more about active prediction. Your brain constantly guesses what it will see and hears, comparing sensory input with expectations to generate your experience of reality. This spiral between perception and belief can trap you in cycles of thought and feeling. If your beliefs are negative, fearful, or limiting, your perceptions will skew to reinforce those states, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Anxiety may heighten sensitivity to threat cues. Depression may filter out positive experiences, and prejudice may confirm biases against others. Your internal world molds your external experience. Breaking free from this spiral requires awareness and effort. Mindfulness practices cultivate the ability to observe perceptions and beliefs without immediate judgment or reaction. This space of awareness allows you to question your automatic filters and open to new possibilities. Cognitive behavioral techniques work similarly, helping you identify and challenge distorted beliefs and replace them with more balanced perspectives. Imagine shifting your internal filters so that your perception becomes more flexible, open, and accurate. You begin to see events more fully, not just through the lens of past beliefs. This allows you to experience reality more richly, reducing suffering caused by misinterpretation and bias. The relationship between perception and belief is a dance, complex, dynamic, and continuous. Your reality is not a fixed external fact, but a living construction shaped by your mind. Understanding this empowers you to reshape your experience by working with your beliefs and perceptions consciously. This deep interplay also reveals the profound subjectivity of reality. It invites humility, recognizing that others' perceptions and beliefs shape their realities just as powerfully as yours shape yours. Compassion grows as you see the world through multiple lenses, appreciating the diversity of human experience. Your journey is to become the conscious creator of your perceptual reality, not a passive victim of mental patterns. By observing and choosing your beliefs, you influence the lens through which you see the world, altering your experience and opening paths to transformation. The spiral of perception and belief is infinite, but not unchangeable. With awareness, courage, and practice, you can break free from limiting cycles and craft a reality aligned with your highest values and truth. In this ongoing process lies your power, The power to build a world not just seen, but truly lived, not just believed, but deeply known. No belief is final. You adopt this to stay free, but now every belief is unstable. Even freedom becomes uncertain. Even openness collapses under its own openness. This paradox reveals the fragile dance of holding beliefs lightly to preserve freedom, yet encountering the instability that arises when nothing feels fixed. In seeking liberation from dogma, you embrace uncertainty and fluidity, welcoming openness as a guiding principle. But paradoxically, this radical openness can unravel itself, leaving you adrift in a sea of endless possibilities without solid ground. From the start, beliefs serve as anchors, mental frameworks that give coherence, identity, and direction. But rigid attachment to beliefs can limit growth and trap you in narrow views. To remain free, you learn to let go, to treat beliefs as provisional tools rather than absolute truths. This stance fosters humility, curiosity, and adaptability, essential qualities for navigating complexity and change. Yet, when every belief is held as temporary, the boundary between knowing and not knowing blurs. This can lead to a sense of epistemic instability, where even fundamental concepts, like freedom, truth, and openness, lose their solidity. You find yourself questioning everything, including the principles that underpin your freedom. The openness that was meant to liberate becomes a source of uncertainty, where every position can be overturned and no conviction lasts. Philosophically, this echoes ideas from existentialism and postmodernism, where fixed meanings dissolve, and freedom is linked with embracing ambiguity. But it also highlights a psychological challenge. The human mind craves some degree of certainty to function effectively. Excessive doubt can lead to paralysis, anxiety, or nihilism. The paradox intensifies as openness collapses under its own weight. Being open to all perspectives can result in overwhelm, indecision, or loss of purpose. The very freedom you sought through detachment can feel like instability or meaninglessness. This is the double-edged sword of radical openness. Navigating this paradox requires cultivating a dynamic balance between holding beliefs lightly and committing to values that provide direction. It involves recognizing that provisional beliefs can still guide action while remaining open to revision. This balance supports resilience and grounded freedom. Practically, this means developing meta-awareness, awareness of your awareness, that lets you notice when openness serves you and when it destabilizes you. It invites cultivating practices like mindfulness, reflection, and discernment to anchor your fluid stance. This paradox also fosters compassion and humility toward others who hold different beliefs, recognizing that all positions are, in a sense, provisional. It encourages dialogue and coexistence amid uncertainty. In everyday life, moments of questioning and doubt are natural and valuable signals. They invite you to explore, learn, and adapt. But it's also vital to find temporary grounding to move forward with confidence. Ultimately, no belief is final reveals freedom's complexity. That true liberation involves embracing uncertainty without being undone by it. It challenges you to dance with instability, finding grace in impermanence and strength in flexibility. This journey is deeply human, balancing the need for certainty with the call of the unknown, holding conviction without attachment, and living fully in the tension between freedom and doubt. Embracing this paradox opens the door to a freedom that is not static, but alive, evolving, and profoundly authentic. Letting go means control. You let go to gain control, but now you're clinging to letting go. The paradox is profound and subtle. What began as a surrender, a release of grip on life's uncontrollable currents, becomes itself an object of obsession, a new form of control disguised as freedom. This is the illusion at the heart of letting go, that in releasing control, you might somehow master it. But when letting go turns into clinging, the surrender you sought transforms into a cage, and control hides behind the veil of surrender. Letting go is often taught as a spiritual or psychological ideal, a way to find peace, reduce suffering, and align with life's natural flow. The wisdom behind it is undeniable. Holding on tightly to pain, fear, or outcomes only amplifies distress and resistance. But when the act of letting go becomes a rigid principle, a rule to follow with exacting discipline, it traps you in a new kind of grip. You start to monitor your surrender, evaluate your release, and control your detachment as if it were a performance or a goal. This meta-control undermines the very essence of letting go. Neurologically, this dynamic reflects the brain's deep need for safety and predictability. The act of surrender activates the parasympathetic nervous system, promoting calm and rest. Yet, when surrender becomes controlled, the sympathetic system remains alert, vigilant to ensure that letting go is done correctly and safely. The brain oscillates between relaxation and tension, never fully trusting the process. This oscillation creates chronic internal conflict, caught between wanting freedom and fearing chaos. In everyday life, this manifests in subtle ways. You may find yourself obsessively practicing mindfulness or detachment, constantly checking if you have let go enough. You might judge yourself harshly when emotions arise, or cling to thoughts that you are failing at surrender. The paradox is that the very tool meant to free you becomes a new chain, feeding anxiety and self-criticism. Consider a person who adopts a philosophy of radical acceptance and detachment. They strive to release attachments to outcomes, relationships, or identity. Yet, when a challenging feeling arises, a wave of grief, anger, or desire, they judge themselves for not surrendering fully. They push harder to let go, which paradoxically tightens the grip on their experience. Their pursuit of letting go becomes a struggle for control over control itself. This illusion is also rooted in cultural narratives that valorize mastery and achievement. Even in surrender, there is a temptation to excel, to be good at letting go. The ego seeks to dominate the process, turning release into another task to accomplish. This traps the mind in an endless loop of trying to control what is inherently uncontrollable. Breaking free from this cycle requires a radical shift in understanding. Letting go is not an act of will or mastery, but an invitation to openness and vulnerability. It is not a technique to perfect, but a lived experience to embrace without agenda. True surrender includes embracing the messiness, the resistance, and the uncertainty without judgment or effort to control those aspects. Mindfulness practice, paradoxically, can help dismantle the illusion by teaching you to observe the impulse to control surrender itself. When you notice the urge to let go properly, you can gently release even that urge. This meta-awareness creates spaciousness, where surrender is authentic and fluid, not forced or performed. Compassion is essential. Be kind to yourself when you struggle to let go, recognizing that clinging is a natural response to fear and uncertainty. Rather than pushing against this, invite curiosity and acceptance of your current experience, even if it contradicts your ideals of surrender. In relationships, work, or inner life, practice flexible letting go, knowing when to hold tight and when to release. This balance honors both your need for agency and the reality of impermanence. It shifts control from rigid domination to adaptive engagement. In conclusion, the pursuit of letting go as a path to control reveals a profound paradox. Clinging to surrender is itself a form of control, an illusion that masks fear behind the guise of freedom. True letting go transcends effort and mastery, inviting presence, vulnerability, and trust in life's unfolding. When you release the need to control, even surrender, you step into a deeper freedom, a freedom not of domination, but of harmony with the unknown. Letting go is not something you do, it is something you become, and in becoming it, you find the control that is not control, the peace that is not forced, the life that flows beyond grasp.